500 years after it. The historian Pausanias called the Battle of Leuctra the most decisive battle ever fought by Greeks against Greeks. But what did Catelyn Tully Stark say so memorably after hearing of Robb's victories in the West early in the War of Five Kings? She said, "Did he beat Lord Tywin?" He was the one that mattered. The Spartans, at least, unfamiliar with the Song of Ice and Fire, took heart in the concept, which is to say that their version of Tywin, King Agesilaus, wasn't present at the battle. He hadn't lost. It was the younger King Cleombrotus in command, and frankly, as we saw, his decisions were terrible, especially considering he comes from this military society where the top of the top spend all their time fighting and thinking about how to fight. Thus, Agesilaus was now more motivated than ever to regain the just recently lost Spartan supremacy, while Thebes, under Epaminondas and Pelopidas, was suddenly the spearpoint of a new Greece. Hundreds of years of the status quo had changed in one afternoon, or morning even. This certainly disrupted the expectations and plans of the biggest players who have been involved in our story, people like Jason of Pherae and great King Artaxerxes of Persia. They've been reckoning with what's going on in Greece and planning around it this whole time. They didn't necessarily expect this battle to even happen, let alone who won. So they had some adjustments to make. They would have to figure out how to twist this to their advantage, as was their wont. But both of these two are going to face internal threats. That's going to make capitalizing on what's going on in Greece more difficult, which might open the way for other people to get their finger or foot in the door or what have you. Most deaths in battle occur when one side breaks and runs. This is well established in the Song of Ice and Fire, in the real world, etc. It's been said many times, right? And it's true. Like that maxim, this episode follows that pattern a bit, which is just after a major battle, we're going to have a lot of deaths, but not because they're running away. In fact, they, for the most part, won't see it coming. Today is a day of assassins, the unseen hands of the gods. Timely deaths that would be hackneyed and convenient if written by anyone other than that most random of authors, reality, right? Reality is the only author that can get away with this sort of thing. Truly, right? This is the Storm of Swords of the series so far, because yeah, lots of people are gonna die. History is cooperating with us as well by giving us a different look. We go from this big battle and then we get to switch to intrigue. That's kind of how it goes. A lot of times, right? Power changes and shifts. People got to fight for it. People fight on battlefields. People fight in the halls of power. But also, the halls of power, let's not forget what that means. That means families. The halls of power can just mean within the house of a certain last name, a certain dynasty. And what's interesting about this time period in particular is how many dynasties are new, yet we also still have ancient dynasties that track themselves back to the gods. So yeah, crowns are claimed on battlefields, but they're also claimed on family estates. And there's nothing like a big unexpected battle to shake things up. The unbeatable mystique of Sparta was gone, but that doesn't mean they're suddenly weak, right? Thebes is suddenly the top power. That doesn't mean they can hold it. That doesn't mean much of anything if they can't capitalize on that, right? It's just a blip in history otherwise. We'll see. Now, that's made worse for Thebes because most of the regional powers don't really want Thebes to have this top spot. They didn't really want anyone to hold it, but Thebes even less so, because most people prefer the enemy they know. Athens and Sparta had been the two powers all along. They kind of like, well, what's this new guy going to do? You know, it's the enemy you know versus the new one, right? So it should be interesting and filled with the unexpected, as it was for ancient Greece at the time. All that and more on this episode of History of Westeros podcast. Hello and welcome back, everybody. I'm well prepared for today, wearing my "Don't make me repeat myself" history shirt. Yes, history does not like having to repeat itself, yet it does so all the time anyway. Here we are repeating history by being here at 3 o'clock on a Sunday. That's our usual time, unless it's a TV season, in which case we're streaming at 6 on Mondays. You can find every episode of History of Westeros podcast on any podcast platform out there, and you can find the video versions here on YouTube and on Spotify. That's right, on Spotify, all our video catalog is there as well. You can also get our episodes ad-free if you check them out on Patreon. If you have questions for us, hit us up at westroshistory@gmail.com. You can also hit us up on any social media platform. We're pretty much on all of them. This episode, of course, is different than our usual. And we have been going, this is the episode 5 of the Game of Thrones at the End of Ancient Greece series, aka A Tale of Three City-States, Athens, Sparta, and Thebes. And we've got a ways to go still. This episode will cover a couple years, and having fun with this. I'm glad to get the feedback from those of y'all who are enjoying this. If this isn't your bag, well, luckily we have a huge catalog, and there's lots of other things you can listen to. Lots of other great A Song of Ice and Fire content. And of course, we'll be hitting the bricks for House of the Dragon in just a month or two here. But before we get started, we have an announcement. Shay and I are very honored to announce that we have been nominated for a Hugo Award in the Best Related Work category, which is related to this episode in that it is one of our History and Westeros episodes rather than a straightforward A Song of Ice and Fire episode. It's our Long Night versus Ragnarok episode. That is the one nominated. And we thank all of those of you who helped nominate us. And we're going to be going to Worldcon. We would have gone to Worldcon anyway, but it's at the end of August in Anaheim. But now we'll be going as nominees instead of just fans and people who love Worldcon. So anything to add to that, Ashay? Did I catch everything or miss anything?
Yeah, you got everything except that if you're thinking about going to Worldcon, get extra value if you decide to go this year, because then you'll be able to vote for us. But also it's just a really fun con with like really deep paneling, a lot of panels, wide variety, academic presentations. So I recommend Worldcon in general if you're the kind of person who goes to cons looking for panels, education, stuff like that. It's not so much of a cosplay con, so if you're looking for a con for that, then you want to go to Dragon Con or something like that. But I love Worldcon. I'm excited to go back to California and really excited about the nomination. We'll be talking about it more in the months to come, especially because we'll, remind y'all when voting opens and stuff like that.
Right on. Yeah, so that's that. We're very excited. Thank you all for the support. And like Ashay said, we will keep you abreast of developments and more news related to that. Let me read you all the section headers for today, get a little advance on what we're going to be talking about. We're in the year 371, and we'll be going to the aftermath of Lutra, then Dark Hooves, Dark Words, Thebes Rising. Then we'll move to the year 370 and the Sword of Damocles. That's right, the Sword of Damocles. You all have heard of that anecdote, that thing. We're going to have it in today's episode. Thessaly will be next, followed by Macedon, Persia, the Great Satraps Revolt, Fallout, Greece. And then we'll take our outro and discuss what's to come in the next episode. Let's get to it. 371, the aftermath of Leuctra. In fact, we even know the day, July 6th, the day Sparta lost their some 300-year-old mystique. And they were scrambling. They hadn't necessarily accepted they had lost it. Some of them still wanted to fight. At the end of the last episode, I pointed out that was going to be difficult for them because their allies were really quite excited to take advantage of the situation and be like, hey, Sparta, you're weaker now. You just lost. We don't have to fight for you right now, or perhaps at all. So we're going to head out. See ya. And that was something they could do comfortably because the way the battle played out, Epaminondas was thinking ahead. He's like, yeah, I don't want to fight Sparta's allies. I want to fight Sparta. So let's avoid any sort of contact during the battle as much as possible. And that played out, and that paid off. Because after the battle, the other commanders who hadn't really been attacked by Thebes despite being on the other side were like, Thebes didn't really come after us even though we were standing right there. You could see very clearly that they focused on the Spartans, and that enabled us to get away. So actually, thanks Thebes, a lot of them were probably just waiting to see where the next shoe fell. Maybe Sparta gets it right back. We're not going to piss them off too much because they might just force us to fight for them again, and we don't want to be punished over much. But we might be facing a new world order here, a new Greece here, and we don't want to piss off Thebes either. So they did the smart thing and kind of just waited to see what was happening. So there were plenty of Spartans who still wanted to fight, but could they? Would they be able to? Well, let's see what happened. Thebes went and set up a trophy. That is normal, right? You win a battle in the ancient world, in ancient Greece, you set up a trophy. And you set the trophy up at the spot where you think the battle turned, like the spot where you think the enemy's lines broke, and the spot at which the tide turned, where you basically started winning, right? Maybe it was a tie before, maybe it wasn't, undecided, but at some point something happened, and it's usually the turning of a line. And there, in this case, that's exactly what happened. It was when Pelopidas took the initiative after Epaminondas' great strategy and charged the Spartans right as they were trying to reform their lines to adjust to the strategy that Epaminondas had used. They were like, uh-oh, this isn't what we were expecting. We better make a change. And while they're changing, Pelopidas charges, and boom, success. What's crazy, too, is this is normal to set up the trophy, as I said, but this was such a big deal that Thebes went against tradition a little bit by coming back later. I don't know when exactly, but later, and making it permanent. Trophies are supposed to be temporal. They're supposed to be like, yeah, battle happened here, but, battles aren't necessarily something that we want to remember forever. That's not how Greece thought about it, because, well, there's going to be more battles, right? I mean, you can't just have trophies everywhere. But this one was so important that Thebes decided to memorialize it forever. You can still see the base of it today. Most of it's gone. But this was 3 years short of 2,400 years ago, and you can still see the base of this trophy. Now, if you're a fan of The Expanse, which Ashea and I are big fans of The Expanse, you may recall the Battle of Point Leuctra, which was in Book 7, I believe. One side in the battle was the Laconians, which is, it's the region Sparta lives in now, and then. So that tells you something about this Expanse faction. They're naming themselves after the Spartans. And the book this takes place, and I said Book 7, is Persepolis Rising. Persepolis Rising is the capital, or not rising, Persepolis is the capital of Persia in this current era, and will be for maybe 60 more years or so. It's on its wind down, but it's been that way for 200 years so far, so it's got a bit longer. Now, Epaminondas never stops thinking, never stops strategizing, never stops pondering what's next. He's a guy that really thinks ahead. Now, Jason Pherae is the one that gets the nickname Prometheus, and we'll talk about him more later, of course, but Epaminondas really could have deserved a nickname like that as well. And of course, he's thinking sort of along the lines of Doran Martell, meaning he's really wants to undo Agesilaus, although more about Sparta than Agesilaus in particular. Although at this point, the two are inextricably connected. So when the time comes to collect the dead, which is very normal, right? Greek commanders, Greek politicians, Greek citizens always expect this. We talked about how important it was. It's a matter of life and death to collect the dead. So both sides tend to allow it to happen. It's like, you want to collect your dead? Go for it. We both swear a little oath to obey, to not fight. It's like a little mini truce. The gods are watching, etc. And all of my Greek historical fanboying throughout the years, I've never seen this violated. So they held true to it pretty well. So, but Epaminondas had an alteration to the plan. Yeah, normally say, go ahead, collect your dead, do your thing. No big deal. Epaminondas said, okay, but one change. Spartan allies. Guys that, hey, remember I didn't try to kill you during the battle? Remember that? Well, also, some of y'all did die, even though we weren't trying to kill you too much. You go ahead first. You pick your bodies up first. I want to let you guys go first. Now, why would he do that? Well, because the Spartans had also, for a very long time, used the collecting of the dead. They sort of manipulated a little bit. They would pick the dead up all in a certain way to hide their casualties. It's like the stormtrooper from Star Wars. They march in single file line to conceal their numbers. Well, Sparta would conceal their casualties by collecting the dead in a mass, like while everyone else was doing it. Epaminondas knew that. He's like, yeah. So he said, yes, Sparta's allies collect their dead, then Sparta's other allies and Sparta's allies. Basically, he left it so that the only bodies left on the field would be Spartans. So it'd be very clear how many died. And this was important because a very unusually high number of Spartan full citizens died. He wanted to see everyone to see that because he wanted to drive home the point. Hey, Sparta didn't just lose. They lost decisively, and their ability to get it going again is hampered, if not severely handicapped, by the loss of these important citizen soldiers. Not to mention a king died on the field. And people like Sphodrios and Cleonymus, guys who were basically villains in the eyes of Thebans, but not so much in the eyes of just these allied cities who were kind of pulled into this whole mess. So that worked really effectively. A bunch of people saw. It wasn't just a rumor, because it's easy to be told that a bunch of Spartans died, but you see it in front of you. You're standing there on the battlefield hanging out, and they're the only ones left. And this is an interesting point, too. Sparta, Thebes, none of these nations had, like, uniforms. They didn't even really have uniform shields. That was a thing that came along pretty soon after this, like less than 10 years after this battle is what we're told by historians. That's when that trend started, when they realized that maybe one too many times people on the same side have attacked each other, especially when you have like 10 different allied cities all fighting in one battle, when you might have been on the opposite side of them 2 battles ago, right? Like, well, we fought for Athens in this battle, we fought for Thebes in this battle. Athens was on the same side as Thebes in that battle, but they had allies on the other side, blah, blah, blah. You can easily be fighting someone that you were on the same side with 2 battles ago, 1 battle ago. Yet they had very little way to distinguish themselves from each other.
Makes me think, of course, of Norsemen, the comedy show. We've brought this up before, but there's a great bit where one of the guys is fighting and is killing, and someone's like, how do you know who's on your side and who isn't? And he goes, if they're on the other side of me, if they're facing me,
if he's coming at me, he must be my enemy, right? And they're like, that works? It's like you never killed someone on your own side? You're like, well, I don't know. I mean, how would I know? Like, after the fact, the guy's dead. He's not complaining. You know, I don't remember who I killed even. Like, it's all so fast. Yeah, so it really is kind of amazing to think about that. Like, how did they tell? Like, they're all Greek. It's not like when it's Greece versus Persia, the style of dress, even though you have like 20 different nations on each side, well, probably like 100 nations on the Persian side, they're all fighting for Persia. The skin color is at least different in some cases. Even when that isn't the case, you at least have different clothing. But these are like guys that are neighbors of each other. My city's 10 miles away from yours, and his is 20 miles away from that. Like, they aren't that different. So, yeah, it's funny to think about. So, yeah, all these. You might have thought they'd figured that out sooner, but. Now, Sparta was a little more uniform in their dress. They had the red cloaks, and so they did stand out. That's why I bring this up now. A lot of the allied armies didn't have that uniformity, but Sparta did, and that's why Epaminondas' play here was so effective, because the Spartans were very distinct. Now, what Sparta wanted was to win another battle quickly to make everyone kind of forget about this. Be like, oh, that was just a blip. Yeah, Sparta's unbeaten streak was broken, but they went right back to winning. Okay, so it really wasn't that big a change. Meanwhile, Thebes is like, we got to, prove that this wasn't a blip. We got to show that this is the new thing. We can beat them multiple times. We got to follow this up with another victory or something to show that our advantage is real. And then maybe make that advantage larger. So the remaining Spartan army's in a bind. Some of them saw the writing on the wall and decided, yeah, we can't fight again. But wait, what happens if we go home? We got to go home and tell everybody we lost? Uh-oh. Like, we got to bring the news that our unbeaten streak is broken. truth be told, a horseman or two had already rushed home back to Sparta to deliver the news. So they're going to find out anyway. But still, they're still going home and being like, yeah, sorry, we're the losers. We're the guys that shamed everyone. Like, this weight fell on them big time. Worse, the ones who didn't want to fight and go home, just the lesser of two evils, were concerned that they'd get attacked on their way back, because they managed to get back up onto a hill. So they're hiding up on this hill. It's defensible, but they can't stay there forever. Is time on their side or not, though? They're like, well, if we leave, we could get attacked. But what's Sparta going to do in the meantime? What are they going to do back home? It can't be that long before they find out, right? We're only like 3 days march away from home. Will they send a relief army? Maybe if we stay here, they'll send help, and then we can fight again. So they really didn't know what to do. And there was a lot of disagreement, and their king was dead, so they didn't have like the one guy who could make the decision. So there's it's a real rock and a hard place for them. If they leave, they risk getting attacked and blowing their opportunity for a follow-up battle. If they stay, well, they could get starved out. Their position could get worse. The hill could be put under siege rather than just this sort of iffy situation they have. So the best thing they might think, well, if we're in this tough position, maybe we should just try to fight it, because at least we die fighting. But the problem with that means a second loss. That means it shows that Sparta's loss, it sort of justifies the first one. So they really didn't know what to do, and they lacked leadership. And of course, that was part of Epaminondas' plan in the first place. Get rid of their leadership, and they're going to be the headless snake. It was working even after the battle. It worked during, and it was working afterwards. So Thebes, their victory comes quickly in terms of the news, because this battle happened in Theban territory, and once again, this is a small place. So the families of the victorious heard the news almost as quickly as we in the modern world would hear. It's almost like the cell phone era was there for them temporarily, because they learned almost immediately. The family of Epaminondas, we know his parents were alive still at this point. So they would have been like, oh my gosh, our son led the victory over Sparta. Oh my goodness, give thanks to the gods, all that. Now he had a brother, Agesilaus, who was probably in the battle too. We don't really hear about him. But now Epaminondas celebrated with the rest. They had a little party or what have you. I don't know exactly what they did. I don't know how they celebrate these sort of things. Probably wine and stuff. But the next day he looked downcast and bedraggled. Like, are you hungover or something? Did you drink too much, man? Like, no, that's not of it. It was like, did someone die? Did we find out about a death after the fact that, you didn't learn about, and someone died close to you, you didn't hear about it during the battle? No, that's not either. I'm chastising myself for immoderate joy. Like, what? Yeah, he celebrated too much, and I don't mean drank too much. He just let himself feel quote unquote immoderate joy. He's like, nah, you got to be more balanced. I gotta be more centered. You can't get too mad. You can't get too happy either. That's his thing. He's like, if you get too mad, you get vindictive, you get bloody, you get bloodthirsty, what have you. If you get too happy, you get lax. You don't push yourself as hard. Your discipline slips. So this is a guy that's, again, I believe I brought this anecdote up when I introduced this character, maybe even in episode 1. This is who he is. This is some kind of dude, just punishing himself for getting too happy. Who does that? Well, he does. And it might sound silly, but it's going to come up kind of big because, Thebes is going to start to act a little bit like they deserve to be in power. Power corrupts. Epaminondas was already looking ahead to power corrupting his own people in the moment of victory. He's starting to think about that already. Talk about thinking ahead. So you can't allow yourself to think, well, hey, just because we won this battle, we're the best now. He knew that over celebrating would lead to slacking off. And he was like, I can't allow that to happen. And it starts with me, right? If I'm the leader or a leader, well, I got to set the example. And he also knew, as I just said, that Sparta still had an army sitting right there. It was a beaten army, but it was a Spartan army. And as the Spartan army was wondering and hoping maybe reinforcements would come, Thebes was concerned about that as well. So Sparta, as I said, they learned of this about 2 to 3 days later, because that's about how long it takes a horse to get there. And you best believe that some horses were speeding off to Sparta to bring that news as quickly as possible. And that's exactly what happened, and that's exactly where we're going next. Dark hooves, dark words. Yeah, you know what I mean. Dark wings, dark words. Well, they didn't have ravens delivering messages, but they did have these horses. What else could I have said there? Dark manes, dark words. Shay and I were talking about it. What's
dark hooves, dark nays.
Dark nays instead of dark words. That's a good one. So Greece made a point of dramatizing, and I mean that literally in actual stage plays, because Greece loved dramatic stage plays, and a lot of them were tragedies. They would dramatize the moment news arrived, usually bad news, because that's more dramatic than good news, right? We all know that. We watch TV and movies and read books. It makes sense, right? But it makes even more sense when you put yourselves in their shoes or their clogs, whatever footwear they had. Because even in the modern world, we know what it's like to wait for news, right? Like, well, did we get the deal? Did I get the job? Is she going to accept my marriage proposal? Just lots of infinite examples out there. When it comes to things like modern war, yeah, we don't get like the top secret information, but we find out when battles happen. We usually find out when bombs are dropped. Not always, but usually. And when we do find out, it's usually pretty quickly. But what we don't usually have in the modern world, some people do, we don't in like America, for example. Europe does, because Ukraine exists and there's stuff happening there. But like, you might be waiting on news of something like the biggest victory in our history just happened, or the biggest loss in our history just happened, and an army is now a few miles away coming to enslave us all. I cannot fathom that level of anxiety, right? And well, but it did exist. And the reactions in Sparta to this loss were anywhere from, oh my God, the sky is falling, to, well, time for us to step up and do our best, right? But the cultural reaction is very odd. And let me talk a little bit about that, because it's super unique and interesting. We're not just talking about nations here. We're not just talking about, your nation may fall because you lost a battle. We're talking about your way of life, which can span nations or not. Sparta thought their way of life was superior because it was working. They were the dominant power, and they believed themselves to be the most moral. So those two things went together. We're the most moral in Greece, therefore we're in charge. They thought those two things were deeply connected. We're the most moral army. You've heard that term before in modern times, the most moral army. Yeah, that's an oxymoron. And they thought of themselves as the most pious, which maybe was true. I don't know that it mattered, but they thought it did. So they thought all these things were self-evident. We're the most moral. We have the best society. That's why we're number one. It all adds up. It's very straightforward. Don't overthink it. So wait, what does this mean now? We've lost? Are we no longer the best nation, or what? What does it mean? Like they had this attitude or this belief in themselves that was so old, so long-standing, it had spanned entire lifespans of many Spartans, that they just never had a chance to think about it. And why would they? Well, let's think about what life would be like if we were losing all the time. Yeah, no, they just don't go there too often, at least not in public, right? So they have all these hundreds of years of being the top dog, top lion in Greece, and the results proved it, right? The results backed that up. And consider just how modern all this is for a minute here. We have the Thebans with their literal pairs of gay lovers in their elite unit, the one that did the most damage, the most famous unit. Meanwhile, Sparta has plenty of homosexuality in their culture, but they don't like it in the military. So you have a side that doesn't like gays in the military that just lost to the side that openly has them. So they don't like that. They don't like losing, because to them it's morality. The less moral army beat them. So modern. And they're like, what does that mean? We're not the most moral? Or does it mean that the other side must have cheated or something like that? They come up with all these excuses. Xenophon, the Athenian warrior, author, historian who was a fan of Sparta and a friend of Agesilaus personally, wrote that Cleombrotus and his inner circle were drunk the night before that battle. No other source writes this. No other historian puts this down. There's no other evidence for it. He pretty much probably just threw that in there because he was a Spartan fanboy and Agesilaus his buddy, and so he's just trying to like, let me float some propaganda out there that'll mitigate some of this. So the country that didn't like, that was accepting of, let me phrase that. The country that was accepting of gay relationships, as long as they're on the down low, that just lost to the country that has open gays in the military. What were the Spartan ephors, the 5 guys who were in charge of Spartan culture, one step down from Agesilaus? All of them, all 6 of them, Agesilaus and the 5 ephors, were all attending a performance. At the time the news arrived in Sparta. What was this performance? Yes, it was naked boys dancing. Yes, the city that doesn't want gays in their military. Yeah, not that I'm connecting, little boys to gay culture, but it is definitely hypocritical to see it this way. Anyway, they have a pattern. They have a kind of a order of effects here, like a standing order. Don't just spread the news to everyone. You go tell the leaders and they decide who knows next, especially at a time like this, which was unprecedented. So the news arrives and they're like, you can just picture Agesilaus is sitting at the play watching the boys dancing, and someone whispers in his ear and he's like, takes a deep breath, nods, waves the messenger away, acts like nothing happened. He tells the other E4s, like maybe during a break in the performance, they just keep watching the performance. They sit there, let it end up. They are not going to let anyone get any sort of clue as to what's happening. They will not. Poker face. That's what they're doing here. No, we just got news, but you guys can keep going about your business. They came up with a plan. All right, we're not going to tell everybody. There's people here. There's foreigners watching our performances. We've got a big festival going on right now. We can't have all these people going home 2 or 3 days from now when the festival ends, telling everyone that we lost. Let's let the festival end and then we'll tell everybody. So that's what they did. They told just who needed to know. And then once the festival ended, then they started reacting. Like, they held it in for a few days. The whole city. I mean, surely there were some exceptions, but this is an unbelievable amount of citywide discipline. They just told who needed to know to keep it secret, to make sure no one else found out and then spilled the secret. So then they reacted, but they reacted backwards. What does that mean? Yes, it's Bizarro Sparta, or perhaps it's Bizarro Greece, because maybe this is normal for Sparta. We don't know what normal for Sparta is in this case, because normal losing, well, that's not normal. But what they did was the families of the slain, the ones who fell in battle, they would walk around cheerfully, acting like something good happened. And the ones whose son or sons or fathers or uncles or whatever survived, they wept. They walked around receiving comfort from their neighbors. The ones whose people survived, the soldiers that survived, were the ones that got the sentiment and the empathy. Like, wait, what? Because that's just this is how they decided to face it. They faced this enormous setback. And it's more than a setback because they thought the gods favored them. It's like, wait, do the gods not favor us anymore? We're really pious. That hurts, right? Is this really the new normal? Are we just on our own? Even the gods don't favor us? Or is this something we can get back? Because if we can get it back by acting a certain way, we're starting right now with that behavior. If it's discipline, we're going to be very disciplined. A number of authors, Greek or not, have written that grief is the ultimate. Maybe love, maybe hate, but grief might be the hardest thing to keep internalized, to not let out, to keep hidden from other people. So Sparta's state discipline, something they made such a big deal out of, was really tested here. And from their perspective, they seem to have passed. They held it in. They rewarded the people whose sons fell in battle, and looked down on the ones who survived because it was a loss. So it's shameful to survive a battle that you lost, right? And the Spartan system this isn't just a cultural thing. This is like law. Some of it is anyway. They have a rule. For anyone who flees from battle is marked forever as a trembler. And this is a legal state. You are a trembler. That means anyone can beat you up. They cannot give you shelter, no fire, no guest right, the equivalent of guest right. They had a version of that. No guest right to a trembler. They can only shave half their beard. They can only wear bedraggled clothes. Again, a warrior first culture, really being a coward, even though you aren't necessarily a coward because you ran away this one time. But that's how they see it. They have no acceptance. No, it's a zero tolerance policy, except that here's a time where they needed to tolerate it, because what are you going to do? Just designate the entire army as tremblers? All of them? What do you do? Like, this is already a Spartan system that's collapsing under its own weight because there aren't enough people that live up to these ideals. Like, they don't have the birth status or the ability to accomplish the martial tasks that are necessary. The bar is too high, and the people that aren't making it, they fall to lower status. Now you got people getting killed who are above the bar. Their society is shrinking. So it's really bad. And what are they going to do? Like, are you going to just throw away all these other soldiers too? So Agesilaus, his rule was more important than ever. They looked to him as a leader more than ever. You might say, well, weren't they already doing that? Well, yeah, but they had two kings, right? Well, what about the dead king? Who's the new king, right? There's a new king, right? Yes. Agesilaus II. So we have Agesilaus II and Agesilaus II. Agesilaus II, however, is 10 years old. So two kings, yeah, but really one king. Because this 10-year-old ain't doing anything. He's not issuing orders. No one's listening to him anyway. They might eventually, but not at this point. So Sparta's two-king system really comes down to one, and this decision comes to Agesilaus. What are we going to do? What are we going to do about the law? He says, Spartans, he calls the assembly, he announces his decision. He says, all right, it's good that we have these laws. It's good that we keep courage at the head of our virtues, that it's the most important thing, and by that same turn, that cowardice is the biggest sin. We will not abandon our laws. We will let them sleep for one day, however. So that's just weasel words or lion words, whatever. He's like, yeah, we're not going to end the law, but we will not use it today. The only time it's ever really come up. We're just not going to enforce it. So we're going to enforce it starting tomorrow. You better believe it. If anyone else runs away, they will face the full extent of the law. But this time, no. We're just going to... I don't know exactly. I would really love to know exactly what words he used to get this across to people who were probably like, whatever you say, man, we're all just paranoid and scared now because, like, is Thebes coming for us? That was on the minds of many. You know, a lot of them were ready to get back out there and fight, but a lot of the others are like, I'm not used to this feeling of being on the losing side, of being in danger. Like, maybe I wasn't as brave as I thought because I'm always just on the winning side, and I can take heart in the fact that we haven't lost in 300 years. Like, what was I worried about? Now they're worried. So Agesilaus says, not just are we suspending the laws, but we got to take action. So he immediately tests some of the allies. Some of the allies kind of abandoned the army up there, but remember what I said, they weren't fully leaving Sparta because they didn't want to test it too much. They were like, well, maybe this is a new world order, maybe it isn't. It hadn't all set in yet. Nobody knew exactly where things were headed. We're only a couple of days after the battle was over here, maybe a week or two. So a lot of these other Greek city-states were still going to toe the line. They weren't going to do anything too out of the ordinary. They weren't going to get too bold yet until they saw where things lay. So Agesilaus knew that, or at least sussed it out. He kind of knew how they were going to think. So he immediately called for soldiers from some of those allied cities to test them, to see if they'd do it, A, and B, because he needed some men to send north. He wanted to send a relief army. He had not yet given up. He was of the same mind as many of those soldiers still sitting on that hill in Boeotia were thinking, like, maybe we can still win a follow-up battle here, and that's it. And that'll erase Leuctra, and it'll look like we can just act like it was a couple of running days of battle. But in the end, Sparta came out ahead. There was a little bit of a setback, but you know, Just call it all one big battle, you know? That's kind of their angle here. So he sends his son, Archidamus, Prince Archidamus, goes out with this relief army, and it heads north. It's heading as quickly as it can to go to Boeotia to link up with the other army and maybe start things back up again. But before they got there, we got to see what's happening in the meantime. Oh, but wait, one last thing. Archidamus, let's not forget, this is Agesilaus' son. He was the lover of Cleonymus. Cleonymus was the son of Sphodrius. Sphodrius and Cleonymus were just killed at Leuctra. So Archidamus might have been pretty happy that his father sent him there, because he might have been looking for some payback. So Thebes is doing their thing in the meantime. Let's check in with them. This next part is called Thebes Rising. So they sent to Athens, also not very far away. This didn't take very long. And they say, look, we beat Sparta. It really happened. How cool is that? Yo, yeah. Athens' response was chirp. Chirp. Crickets. They loved to hate Sparta. They didn't love to love Thebes. Despite them being closer, they're a democracy. They got more in common than Sparta. It's that old thing. It's that old thing that we humans do. Politics, religion, everything else. People often hate what's more similar to them than something that's the polar opposite. There's plenty of like ancient Christians or Muslims that hated the other side, but hated other Muslims or Christians even more because they're a different denomination, you know, and it doesn't have to be about religion. Like I said, it can be politics. There's how many Democrats in America hate other Democrats as much or more so than they hate the Republicans or vice versa. There's a lot of that, right? We all know this.
I think there's like two ways that happens in particular, many more ways than that. But in some of the ways I think of is feeling threatened because they're in your same sphere, right? You know, like they're kind of can
they actually
fill
have
the
more
same,
power over you.
Yeah. And so feeling threatened, like if they could fill your slot, you know what I mean? Because they're so similar to you. But also, there's the other idea in terms of like politics is that you like have higher standards for them.
Yes,
right.
That's a good one, and that comes up here because Athens just thinks it's better than Thebes. They don't want to be subordinate to that. They're like, subordinate to Sparta's one thing because, well, Sparta beat them. You know, they had a whole thing. They had a Peloponnesian War and Sparta won. So Athens is like, well, they beat us. We haven't lost to you. And we don't really want to fight you. And we also don't really want you to be that close with you because that's the enemy we know. You're similar to us. We don't want to prop you up. It might make everyone think that your version of democracy, your version of all these things is the superior version, whereas we think our version is superior. It's very much what Ashay was saying just now. But it goes farther than that. There's another angle here that I'm trying to get into, which is, Athens just didn't like Thebes because they looked down on them culturally. They thought they were like country bumpkins. They're the equivalent of the redneck or something like that, the way a city person looks at a country person or something like that, you know, just using terms that are somewhat similar. Clog-wearing Boeotians, that's what they called them. They wore clogs, which was like a rustic thing. You know, I don't know, maybe that's like saying someone wears Crocs or something like that, which I don't have a problem with, but some people look down on that, right? So Athens didn't really want Thebes in charge either. They're like, well, yeah, we don't want Sparta in charge, but that doesn't mean we want you in charge. We want us in charge. So, and arguably Sparta was preferable because Sparta was so concerned with land armies and land empire, where Athens is like, we're a naval empire, bro. They're not really even interfering with us that much. Only that blip when they had that Lysander guy who's been dead for decades. That was the only time they really gave us a challenge at sea. So they're so focused on land and all this other stuff. They're so conservative. They never change. We're not really worried about them adapting to beating us out there, you know? But Thebes, they're like, they might adapt. They might be able to do these things. And we don't want to be subordinate to country bumpkins that we look down on. Was this short-sighted on Athens' part? Yeah, absolutely. Just like all these examples I've given of similar, it's short-sighted when there's infighting in political parties. It's short-sighted, all these things. Yeah, this is just as short-sighted. Partly because Thebes said, okay, well, that's kind of surprising, but we have other options. We can call one of our other friends. We got other possible friends. Hey, we just gained leverage. We just beat Sparta. A lot of people are going to want to be our friends. We offered you first. Okay, you said no. Let's see, who's next? How about that Jason of Pherae guy? He's looking pretty strong right now. Maybe we should make friends with him. Again, this gets into the weirdness of fellows, allies who have very little in common, teaming up against people that they do have things in common with. Jason is a military dictator. He's more like a Sparta than an Athens or a Thebes. But go figure, enemy of my enemy is my friend kind of situation. Maybe that's more what this was like. Athens was friendly with Jason. They didn't want to be an enemy of his, but they saw how they were kind of competing for the same things. Jason openly talked about building his own navy from the same timber forests that Athens was getting theirs. Athens didn't own these forests, neither did Jason. They were owned by Macedonia. And Jason's like, well, what if we're next door to Macedonia? That's our next door neighbor, Macedonia. Athens, you're farther away. You're not next door to either of us. You're a little farther away. You're not far, but you're not as close as we are. So what if we get that timber, either through force or by offering more money? Then we build a navy, and you don't have timber to build ships anymore. We don't even have to beat you at sea. We just take your resources away, and all your ships are going to rot and fall apart. Never mind that Jason comes from horse country. They don't have sailors. But this is still a fear that Athens had. They're like, that's not good. We don't want that. And now Thebes is going to team up with them? Maybe we were short-sighted. But anyway, Jason's young, so like all these things about, well, maybe he's not a sailing guy. You wouldn't put it past him either, given all the other adaptations and advancements he had made. So again, this guy was nicknamed Prometheus, and his reputation for thinking ahead was well known. So when he talks about things that are coming, you take it seriously because he has a reputation for being right. When he talks about what he's going to accomplish, you take that seriously too, because this is a guy that has accomplished everything he said he was going to accomplish and then some. He had been talking openly about Persia as the common goal of all Greece. Like, hey, Persia attacks us all the time. Right? Why not turn the tide? Why not they're always hiring our soldiers. Why not go after them? So Thebes and Sparta grinding each other down, he doesn't like that. He wants Thebes and Sparta to be part of his team, his go get Persia team. Don't fight each other, right? It's the same sort of thing. This is a different level of infighting. Thebes and Sparta may seem like diametrically opposed. In a lot of ways they are, but from Jason's perspective, they're all Greek. They're all not Persian. They could all be a weapon against the bigger common enemy, right? So they ask for, hey, buddy, what's going on? Can you help us out here? Do you want to be our ally? Jason does more than say yes. He gets 1,500 of his best troops and rushes south. And we've talked before about how quickly this guy moves. When he wants to get somewhere quickly, he'll camp for just a few hours, wake up, go, right? And that's what he does. He saw the opportunity and he wanted to show off. And he's like, hey, they're inviting me to put myself in the middle of things and maybe broker a peace or broker whatever. I love to be in the middle of things. That's where I am all the time. They're inviting me to be where I want to be. So he jumped at this chance, brought 1,500 soldiers, which is 1,500 soldiers. That's a lot, but it's not enough to conquer something. He can't take a city. Well, maybe he could, but it's not an invasion force. You don't look at that like an invasion force, but you also can't just he's weak, let's get him. Not with his 1,500 of his best soldiers. And part of the reason he moved so quickly was to show that he could. He had that reputation. I bet he turned on the jets even more to prove that it was true when people were actually watching. He got there fast. And let's not forget, he was a friend of Thebes. His wife was Theban. His first kid, a daughter named Thebe. Now he got there and he encouraged them to make peace. So he says. Now I believe that. I believe that he encouraged them to make peace. The part I'm not so sure about is he takes a lot of credit for it after the fact. He's like, yeah, I got Sparta and Thebes to calm down. Without me, they might have just gone right back at it again. That's exactly the sort of thing he would do. He puts himself in the middle or gets put in the middle and then claims credit for whatever happens. Unless things go wrong, but they didn't go wrong, so nothing to do but claim credit. He said, I went back and forth between both camps. I went up to the hill, talked to the Spartans, showed them the folly of fighting right now, talked to the Thebans, told them it was magnanimous and manly to hold back, show that worthiness, show that you're the bigger city, that you don't need to punish these guys, that you've made your point, And someone like Epaminondas, Pelopidas, they're like, yeah, because as we'll see in the future, Epaminondas and Pelopidas are a different sort in terms of how they deal with defeated enemies. Even Greeks in this era and later very commonly follow the whole battering ram rule. If the battering ram touches the gate, all bets are off. We're going to do whatever we want with your people when we take your city, which usually means pillaging and enslaving. Pelopidas and the Epaminondas weren't about that. They're like, no, you can't do that. We're never going to get after this cycle if we don't treat our neighbors better. Sparta didn't care about that. They're like, no, we're in charge. We do what we want. Now, we won't go too far. We have some restraint. You know, we're not executing people left and right, but we will kill a few people here and there because it needs doing. So that's different. So that's that's what Jason wants. He's like, yeah, don't kill each other because I want you all to work for me. So he didn't want Sparta to lose too much glory or supremacy either, because he wants that supremacy and glory. He wants that people afraid of Sparta. He wants Persia to be afraid of Sparta. He doesn't want them to lose that. He just wants it pointed at Sparta, or pointed at Persia. He wanted Persia to fear a united Greek army that included the mighty Sparta, right? So there's no more undefeated Sparta, but they can still scare people. They can still scare Persians. So it's sneaky, right? He's acting like he's doing all this. He's centered here, but he isn't necessarily changing anything. He's taking a lot of credit for it. I'm not sure that anything would have gone differently here. But his charisma was so potent and well known that it's hard not to give him some credit. He was saving Greek lives. He was saying, yeah, I'm leadership material. Look at what I'm doing here. I stopped the fighting. Did he? We're not really sure. He definitely presented it that way. So he said, hey, Thebes, leave it at that. You know, one victory, leave it at that. They did not leave it at that. and this is why I'm not so sure Jason really did a whole lot here, even though he claimed for it. Because Thebes is not really going to stop. They just are going to start with what's closer to home. They're going to start shoring up their region. When Sparta had the upper hand, they were able to insert some garrisons here and there. That's going to be Thebes' first task, is getting Thebes and Boeotia to be purely theirs. Get rid of all the Spartan influence. That's their first priority. And the Spartan army, their first priority is getting out of the pickle they're in. So Jason says he arranged a truce here, right? He wants all those dudes. Now, Persia also likes this because Persia doesn't want... we want Greece fighting each other a little bit because we don't want this unified Greece thing. We don't want that unified Greece thing that Jason's talking about. But we don't want them too deep in the trenches or there won't be any mercenaries for us to hire. And we do love those Greek mercenaries, right? So stack all that together. Persia wanted peace in Greece to buy soldiers to attack Egypt and elsewhere. Jason wanted peace in Greece to lead them to attack Persia. He's like, why take their pay when you can take their pay, right? Give me that. So Persia's position as top paymaster for unemployed Greek soldiers was wavering because other power brokers in the Greek world had figured out that blueprint and headed to implementing it. Jason wasn't the first, although he was taking it farther, perhaps, than anyone else had to that point. So he goes home and he starts telling people what a great job he did. He's like, yo, I'm even stronger than I was. They invited me down there because they needed me, and I delivered. I stopped the bloodshed. I got them to agree to a truce. And, oh, by the way, on my way home, I passed through Thermopylae. You guys know Thermopylae. That's the movie 300. That was the big pass that was guarded to keep the Persians out. It's hard to get into Greece without going through Thermopylae with an army. So Jason said, I'm probably coming back. And even though his words were, I'm coming back, I'm a peace broker, I'm a leader. When he passed through Thermopylae, he ordered his 1,500 soldiers to destroy the city of Heraclea, which was the northern defense point. Now, Thermopylae, he could just walk right back through. If Greece wanted to fortify it to keep him from coming back in, they wouldn't have enough time. Because unless he didn't come back for a while. But everybody knew he'd be back. And in fact, he might be back pretty soon. In fact, he was definitely going to be back pretty soon if you believe what he said. So he's telling everybody how well it went in his country. He's like, look, he hasn't fully gotten control of Thessaly. It's a big country. Very disunited. A lot of still parts of it are still somewhat tribal. So he's got most of it, but he's trying to lock down the rest. And he's using this as leverage. He's like, look, I did all this stuff there. Look, Thebes just won that battle, y'all. I didn't tell them this, but they're bumpkins. Like, Athens agrees with me, so they're not fit. They're not fit to be number one there. Athens and Sparta, their time is done, and Thebes isn't fit. It's our time. Thessaly should be number one, and I'm number one in Thessaly. So he's selling them on, hey, wasn't it great? Wouldn't you want to be in that position? Like the leaders of Greece? Like that's a serious trickle down for everybody. Yeah, I'm number one, but you guys will all be elevated. Every noble's going to have more land. Every peasant's going to have more esteem. Everything's going to be better. It's very, very, very encouraging. Very, very tempting for the Thessalians. Many of them. Not all of them, but a lot of them. He's very charismatic. He's very good at this. On top of that, you got people like the Athenian philosopher Isocrates. Very confusing. Not Socrates, Isocrates. He has been in and out of our story as a man who looks up to these charismatic, powerful leaders and says, you should take over. Unified Greece is a good thing. We want that. We're better off that way. Look how much we fight each other. Of course, he's not thinking ahead. He's not thinking, whoa. If he were really on top of his game, he'd be thinking bigger nations still fight each other. Just because it's a bigger nation doesn't mean it's immune to war. It just has bigger wars. It's bigger civil wars. Yeah, so he's imagining one leader can hold it all together. Yeah, not really. Maybe for a time. Yeah, it's just pie in the sky. Sorry, Isocrates. Isocrates came 2,400 years before Frank Herbert warned us all about charismatic leaders. Dune, Jason of Pherae is definitely Paul Atreides here. And yeah, I think Socrates would have encouraged Paul to follow the golden path. He'd be like, yeah, we need you. We need you to take over everything. And yeah, anyway. Yeah, I'm not with you there, Isocrates. So the Spartan army on the hill is another reason why I'm not so sure that Jason didn't exaggerate his role, because Sparta either didn't trust him or, like I said, Jason was exaggerating, because he got them to agree to a truce, as he said, or maybe a truce was agreed to. Maybe he didn't do that. Either way, the Spartan officers said, okay, they told their men, hey, we've got a truce now. We've got a truce with Thebes. We have we're going to leave in the morning. So get ready. But instead, they left at night. They left before the morning, like 5-6 hours ahead of that. They didn't tell anyone except themselves, and they just changed their plans at the last second. They knew they were going to change those plans. They just didn't tell anyone because they were afraid of word getting out. They kind of hoped word would get out that they were leaving in the morning because they wanted their enemies to find that out. They wanted Thebes to think they were leaving in the morning. They wanted maybe Jason to think they were leaving in the morning, but they left at night. They were so wary of being attacked on the march, they used deception. They didn't even go the most straightforward path. They took a circuitous route, so they'd be less likely to be followed, a route that their enemies would not guess they'd take. And when morning came, the Thebans and Jason were like, okay, they're gone. Interesting. The plan worked, sort of. I don't think Thebes was going to attack them from behind, so it maybe didn't matter. Jason probably wouldn't have either or anything like that. But they were trying to be safe. They wanted to be sure. The last thing they needed was another loss to report as they got home. It was already going to be difficult enough to get home and be like, yeah, we're the guys who lost. Hey, what's going on? Even though they took a circuitous route, even though they took an unusual route home, less than a day after leaving, they encountered the relief army sent by Agesilaus under his son Archidamus. One day too late. They were already gone. They had given up their fortified position. Too late now. So Archidamus said, the gods really aren't on our side right now. One day, if we had shown up a day later, like if you guys had waited 12 more hours to leave, we would have shown up and then we could have maybe attacked, and too late now. So they went back home. Now there's no doubt they'd be back, but when? So again, when news of that came, Jason was able to just brag even more. He's like, yeah, see, look what I did. I stopped that from happening. Like, it was my timing. Like, as much as the timing of all this is so fortuitous in a superstitious society, even people who don't believe in the gods or in omens are going to go, the gods favored me here. Look at that. Look at that. You know, it's just too straightforward to the rank and file people out there that do believe in these superstitions. Yeah, pretty bad. Okay. Now we move to the year 370. We are in the year 370 from 371. And that's cool because we get to say a few fun things at the beginning of the year. To start off, though, I want to point out how we've kept track of various kings in the states north of Greece, but the only family we've kept track of outside of Greece is the Persian royal family for the most part, and a few of the other noble families in Persia. Now we need to look at a few of the other families because, well, as these kingdoms are growing, the temptation for internal strife, for assassinations, for seizing the crown from your father, your brother, your uncle, whoever, becomes greater and greater. Things that we're very familiar with, the type of intrigue we're very familiar with, not just from the real world, but very much from A Song of Ice and Fire. As one family member leverages its house's power to increase that power, the internal strife potential goes up because the temptation to seize that power, which is increasing, is all the more greater. The sculptor Praxiteles, his career began around this time of 370 BC. He was the first ever person in the world known to carve a full-sized female nude sculpture, which clearly that means that men had been carved fully nude sculpted before that. That was not written in this article I read, but clearly that must be the case, unless the full male statue came later. Well, maybe that's the case. Kind of doubted, given the way these Greeks were. Interesting thing about him is that scholars and art historians and regular historians, they're positive that some of these ancient world statues that we still have are his. They just don't know which ones, because a lot of these ancient sculptures, we're just not sure who made them. But this guy was so famous, so influential, they're sure, mathematically speaking, like the odds of none of these being his are tiny. But they don't know for sure which ones there are. So it's kind of funny. We definitely have the work of Praxiteles still around in this world. We just don't know which ones there are. There's no, just like anything else, like a lot of these infighting things we talked about, go to an even more micro version of that. The community of art historians. I wouldn't go so far to say they hate each other, and some of these factions within art historians hate each other as much as certain Christian denominations hate other Christian denominations or what have you. But yet again, there is not agreement. And then some of these arguments are probably not violent, but like they probably get pretty mad, and at some point, like, no, you really look at this evidence. This is not 3rd century, blah, blah, blah. I don't know what kind of the arguments take, but I'm sure they get pretty fierce, right? Eudoxus. Now we'll come back to Praxiteles because some of his other stuff is going to pop up here and there, but we're introducing him now, and I think throughout the rest of our series there'll be a moment or two where we can bring him up because statues matter. Statues come up a lot. They're the province of the wealthy and the successful, and Greeks loves its statues. A guy named Eudoxus of Cnidus. I probably said both the name and the place wrong there. The mathematician he figured out the formula for determining the area under a curve. I don't know how he did that, but well done, Eudoxus of Cnidus. That's a lot of you who know math pretty well are like, might have known that or not. And you're like, well, now you know. To be mad at for all those difficult math questions or for making the world a better place because of his calculations. He was also a doctor and an astronomer and a lawmaker and a student of Plato. So, boy, his resume was fat. Arguably, he was the most successful, most influential mathematician in ancient Greece, period, next to Archimedes, who will be born in 287. So Eudoxus, during his life, for a long time, was the most, until Archimedes came along. Now, Archimedes, like I said, came along in 287. That's 83 years after where we are now. But Archimedes was born in Syracuse, or Syracuse. I don't know how they said it. Both is probably right. And that's where we're going next. The Sword of Damocles. That's right. You all have heard of this anecdote thing, but just in case you need a refresher. Dionysius, the tyrant of Syracuse, good example of a popular leader who seized power and used the wealth of his city to pay mercenaries and thus hold power. He was also a poet, not a very good one. I think I may have told you about his poetry in a past episode. If not, we'll come back to it because it's going to come up in a very humorous way in a couple of years from where we're at. So he's kind of the opposite of Jason in that he built his power base the same way, take money, buy mercenaries, keep paying those mercenaries, hold power, blah, blah, blah. He was just much farther down that road. At this point, he's in his 60s and had held power for a long time using this method. But he was the opposite of Jason in that he was very not immune to the pleasures of the flesh. Maybe in the long term, Jason would get this way. But right now, Jason is, he's like Adonis or something. The guy goes exercises every day and makes his soldiers keep up with him and says, hey, soldier, you can't keep up with me. You're not in my army. Dionysius is wow overweight. Like he's Illyrio, drinks and eats all the time. Very lavish, very Persian in that regard. Some people look down on him because his lifestyle was very Persian, and Greeks don't like Persians. So he had a poet at his court. He was a poet, so he surrounded himself with other poets and philosophers. Plato was there for a while. He once enslaved Plato and then let him go. And yeah, this guy was a real piece of work, this Dionysius. So
really
Damocles
lived up to his name.
Huh?
He really lived up to his name, didn't he?
He really did. Damocles many times would praise Dionysius's court, like how lavish your court is, how nice, how the vintage of your wines, the nice gold, the purple cloth, all the nice stuff. He's like, he would praise it all the time. Dionysius got tired of the flattery one day and he's like, look, man, I don't think you get it. Let's trade for a day. You be me for a day and I'll be you. And this is how you're going to understand what it's like. Above your head will be a sword hanging by a single horsehair. And here it comes from that quote.
To evoke the sense of what it is like to be king, though having much fortune, always having to watch in anxiety against dangers that might try to overtake him, whether it is a jealous adviser or servant, a slanderous rumor, an enemy kingdom, a poor royal decision, or anything else.
Put in other ways, you can't enjoy anything because you're always worried that someone's going to try to take it from you or that you'll screw it up yourself. One could lead to the other. It's kind of similar to what Stannis said about, you can't really relax. You have to be king. You have to be king all the time. You can't have friends. You only have subjects, that kind of thing. And others have interpreted this anecdote differently because it's been around for 2,400 years. It's a really interesting philosophical point. For example, some people say it's a good reason to enjoy life as best as you can because death looms over everyone. You could die at any moment, so just enjoy yourself. Make the most of what you have. It's in Shakespeare. It's very similar to the phrase, uneasy lies the head that wears the crown. Very similar. Canterbury Tales gets deep into it. JFK said nuclear war, the threat of nuclear war is the sword of Damocles. A flaming sword held above the world, Lightbringer. That's the concept here. It's been in a lot of songs. The Rocky Horror Picture Show has a song called The Sword of Damocles. Lou Reed has a song about it. Trivium, Sleep Token. Probably the most recent to do a song about it was them. They did one last year about it, 2025. Rap. It comes up a lot in rap. Because the concept of kings is very common in rap. Well, not very common. It's frequently found in rap music. People talking about being the king and how it's acknowledged that staying king is really hard. The Fugees have a song called Zealots that refers to the sword of Damocles. I really wish it was a concept more would-be tyrants, would-be people who seize power would learn before they do that, because then they might not do that. They're like, this isn't all it's cracked up to be. You seize that power, and then you can't let it go, because then the people who you stepped over to get to it will kill you or get their revenge. And so, yeah, it's kill you. You've put yourself in a kill or be killed situation. You thought you would enjoy. You thought it would be the best thing ever, but it actually sucks. So that would be a good thing for more people to learn. Don't become a tyrant, y'all. You won't like it. You won't enjoy it yourself. If you did it, you made yourself a tyrant so you could be the one guy that got to enjoy everything. Well, you won't. You won't like it. You won't have fun. You won't have time to have fun. You'll be too worried about who's coming to get you. Perhaps what isn't said enough is that the sword of Damocles hangs over families, especially powerful families. Now, Dionysius at this point was 62 years old, as I said. So his fears would also include just, I'm old now and I eat and drink a lot. I could just drop dead any minute from my lifestyle, let alone murder. So now this is a guy that was able to handle fear. This wasn't some paranoid man in general. It just goes to show how heavy the crown is. This is a guy that was a military commander. Like Jason, he was a military leader that grew his esteem, his reputation by being good in a fight. So he wasn't a coward. He was, in fact, very much the opposite. I mean, it's just another thing he used to gain power, though. He used his soldiering career to make himself a hero, and then he put himself into politics, and then he staged an attack on himself. This is when he was very young, when he was in his 20s or so, after his successful military career where they defeated Carthage. Carthage was the enemy of Syracuse on and off for, well, forever. Carthage is still the enemy long after Dionysius goes and was before. He had more success against Carthage than most Syracusan rulers. He got about 2/3 of Sicily for Greece, for himself, but Carthage held on to that other third. And you all know Rome, when Rome comes around, which is, another 100 years or so, give or take, they fight Carthage for Sicily in the First Punic War. And yeah, it's a big whole thing. Anyway, what did he do to gain power after his heroism in the military? It's very normal in the modern world for someone to have a military career, a brief one, just so they can put it on their resume because they want to go up in politics. This guy actually saw combat, so it's a little different. Was actually a leader, but still, he leveraged it just the same way. As I said, what did he do? He, as a political figure, he was attacked. He survived. And then he went crying to the assembly. He's like, look, I'm this important political figure. I got attacked. I need bodyguards. The city should pay for my bodyguards. He pushed. They agreed. Well, turns out the attack was staged. He was never attacked. He faked it. Have you heard of such a thing? A leader staging a fake attack on themselves? No, never. That's never happened in the real world. He gained further popularity. He was already popular. He gained more popularity by being the guy that survived a hit. They're coming to get me, but I beat it. I survived. I toughed it out, and now I've got bodyguards. What did he do with those bodyguards? Got them to be real loyal, treated them real well, like Jason was doing, 50 years later. And then once those bodyguards were real loyal, he used them to seize power. He got the city to give him soldiers and then used those soldiers to take over the city. Pretty clever, actually. He elevated his station like Lysander did decades before. He actually had divine honors in his name while he was alive. Usually that's the thing that happens after you're dead, or usually it doesn't happen at all. But during his life, he was worshipped as a god, which is pretty wild. He was actually very successful. Most powerful city in the Greek world by most accounts. And partially because Sicily is so far to the west, it's on the fringes of the Greek world. You go a little farther west and you're in Italy or Spain, or that's not what it was called then, but you get the point. He conquered a lot of the boot of Italy, right? And he wasn't just a great military leader and a tyrant and a great economic leader. He was an innovator like Iphicrates or Jason. He built things and designed things that were used in war. He actually popularized / created the first Western crossbows in the Greek world. They had already existed over in China for a while, but they called them belly bows because you reload them like on your belly, like you push it like that to reload it. And then he took it farther and made big ones like ballista, like modern, what would have been modern in the medieval times. Many hundreds of years later, he was making them then. And he also was a big wall builder. The walls of Syracuse were really, really well designed and really used new techniques. And he was a guy that had been directly involved with that too. In fact, Rome, when they do come 100 years from now, they're going to have a hell of a time taking it thanks to those walls and thanks to Archimedes, the inventor mathematician who we mentioned that will be alive at the time when Rome conquers the city. But all that success, man, he had all that success. He made Syracuse the most powerful Greek city. No one ever killed him, He had poets and philosophers and acclaim and all this other stuff. But he was paranoid about everything. And he knew that his own family, the only reason his family didn't get him, or a reason his family didn't get him, was because he was worried about that. And so he kept his son, Dionysius the Younger, he kept him cloistered. He wouldn't let him out to do things. He kept him locked down, which isn't good for the guy who's going to take over after you. This guy wasn't out there learning. He doesn't know how the city works. So, yeah. Now, Dionysius the Elder had a brother-in-law named Dion, who was his most trusted advisor. And Dion was a real, I'm a firebrand, a real guy who had big hopes for making Syracuse into a great city of democracy and center of Greek learning. And that didn't really work out. We'll come back because Dion is still around, despite Dion and Dionysius not getting along anymore in terms of their political vision. Dion was not killed or anything. And, well, Dionysius might regret that. So we'll come back to Dion. But I will point out that Dion was a lover of Plato. They were probably lovers. It's not 100% certain. Plato also had high hopes for the city of Syracuse and had gone there. And of course, I pointed out Dionysius threw him in jail, or threw him in the, not jail, but sent him to the quarries as a slave for a while. So yeah, anyway. So this guy's been around. He's been doing stuff, but he's mostly been working in his own region, which just overlaps with the region we're talking about, even though he's fully Greece. So yeah, Jason probably learned from him by watching his rise and doing some of the things he did. Now but he's going to start getting a little more involved as he's more powerful and his sphere of influence grows. Something I mentioned, I think it was last episode, maybe it was 2 episodes ago, is that he teamed up with the Illyrian king Bardyllis, the coal miner king, the guy that formed a kingdom. He had been a coal miner, literally. It's like something out of the Faceless Men, mines in Valyria. This guy becomes a king from the mines. He and Dionysius teamed up to try to loot the Temple of Delphi. That was a little while ago, but in between now and then, remember Delphi has a crazy amount of wealth. And actually, let me give you a little brief moment on that. The wealth at Delphi is like this bizarre game of chicken. And what I mean by that is it's so much money. There's literal kingdom building amounts of money stored there given to the gods. There's tens of thousands of talents stored at Delphi at this time. Do you remember how much a talent is? I told you a while back. I don't blame you if you forgot. It's 57 pounds or 26 kilograms of gold or silver. 57 pounds of silver or gold, 1 talent. Tens of thousands of talents of gold and silver sitting there unguarded, because who would steal from the gods? Oh, yeah. So something like well over 500,000 pounds of gold and silver. Probably 1 million pounds of gold and silver there. Just sitting there. And some of that stuff it's not just blocks, not just ingots, it's not just coins. You got things like artifacts, like the crown worn by some king. You got Olympic laurels. You got statues of Zeus. You've got things believed to have curses or magical powers, like jewelry worn by Paris, jewelry worn by Agamemnon. I mean, the crazy, wealthy, valuable stuff that only the gods are protecting. So you can see why someone like Dionysius and Bardyllis would be like, let's just take that. But Sparta, remember Sparta, Agesilaus and other people teamed up to stop that. Nope, do not do that. Well, let's remember what happened in the last episode. There was an earthquake. There was an Atlantis-like event where that city sank, and Delphi was also damaged by either the same, I forget if it was the same earthquake or a different or a related one. Delphi was destroyed, and it's not going to be rebuilt for a long time. So it's also kind of damaged right now. So it's not even in its best state. So the question is, what have we been saying? This blueprint that exists, that Persia has followed, that Dionysius has followed, that other people can quite clearly see, that Jason seems to be following. Lots of money, buy mercenaries, use those mercenaries to get more money to keep paying them. Kingdom. 1 million pounds of gold and silver just sitting there. How sacrilegious is it exactly to steal that? Would soldiers fight for a sacrilegious cause? That's the big question, isn't it? Who's going to find out? Who's going to test this? Who's going to take this money and try to figure that out? Well, Dionysius and Bardyllis almost did. They tried and they were thwarted. There's a point at which the answer becomes yes. They will fight for a sacrilegious cause, and that yes point aligns with, well, it's the question Bronn asks Tyrion. Remember, Tyrion was like, would you kill a child if I ordered you to do it, Bronn? He's like, well, the question isn't wouldn't I do it? The question is, how much would you pay me? I was like, if you pay me enough, yes. That was his answer. He's like, there isn't an amount that you could pay me. He's like, it would not be cheap. Have me kill an adult? That's cheaper. Kill a baby? Yeah, I'll do it. And then Tyrion's like, what kind of man do I have in my employ here? It's like, well, you just found out, Tyrion. So yes, that's what we're dealing with here. It's just a matter of, that's why I called it a game of chicken. Someone is going to break and be like, I got to do it. I'm going to take this money and it's either going to work or it's not. Who's going to do it? Well, let's move a little farther here. Hippocrates of Kos, before we move on, the father of medicine himself. He died this year. He was a great man. He did his best to separate religion and superstition from medicine. He wanted to focus on prognosis, data, not on beliefs, right? Now, if you're curious, Kos is about 4 o'clock on the Aegean clock that I pointed out before. It's near Rhodes, the island of Rhodes, not, Rhodes. So, important guy, father of medicine, but a lot of confusion around him because there was a lot of Hippocrateses. It's very traditional for your grandson to be named after you. So he came from a tradition of doctors. So some of his deeds may have been actually the deeds of his grandson or his grandfather or his great-great-grandfather. But either way, 2 thumbs up, Hippocrates, father of medicine. Ashay and I will be attending the Mad King play in the UK. The weekend of it, we are going August 14th and 15th, is that right?
Yeah, we are going both the 14th and the 15th. We're going to see it down in the stalls, like the same level as the stage, and then up in the circle so we can get kind of a view from a little bit further, which we thought would be nice if we're making that trip all the way there. Might as well see it a few times. But yeah, so we will be there the week of August 14th, 15th. Our days aren't set yet, but, to our UK fans, to our fans who live near Birmingham, who live in London, because we will spend time in London, hit us up.
Yeah. This somewhat replaces the trip we had been talking about, planning a group trip last year to go to the UK or Ireland. We will still do something like that a different year, but this came up and we just can't do 2 Europe trips in 1 year like that. So we can't afford that, but we will have another opportunity or other opportunities to visit filming locations or the Game of Thrones spot in Belfast. So those of you who had been curious about that, this has taken its place for now, but we will of course be making future announcements when we have other trips planned. Hopefully some of y'all can join us in the UK for this. So, as I told you, let's go to Thessaly. Jason has his Theban wife and his daughter named Thebe. And I told you a little while ago, we need to start learning a little more about these big players' families because, well, this is the direction things are heading. If you're establishing a dynasty, we got to know what sort of family culture is here. Are they with him? Are they against him? What's the situation? What's the deal, yo? So he's still relatively young. He's got his daughter Thebe, and he had 3 sons, Tissaphonis, Lycophron, and Paethalaus. Now, they're all pretty young at this point. They're not doing anything. He had 2 brothers named Polydorus and Polyphron. There was also an older son of Polydorus named Alexander. So Jason's nephew, Alexander, he was an adult as well and significant. So none of these family members of his are really like him, other than, they like money. It's a rich family, very wealthy family. Thebe, actually, as we're going to see in the long run, is probably the bravest of the group, besides maybe Jason himself. We'll see. So the Pythian Games were coming up. The Pythian Games happen in the summer, like August, September. So they would be happening roughly a year after Leuctra. So because Leuctra was July of 371, so the Pythian Games were scheduled for August, September of 370. So Jason is doing all this talk about how he's going to preside over the games, how he's going to show up and be a leadership figure. He puts it out that he's going to be offering sacrifice. He's going to be leading sacrifices at the games, which is a big deal. It's costs a lot of money. That's what heads of state do. This is head priest stuff. So he's basically nominating himself as a head of state. He is a head of state, but he's inserting himself into it regardless because he wasn't officially invited. No one's going to say no to him. But he takes it a step further. He says, hey, everybody, whoever brings the best sacrificial bull, whichever city, y'all have some friendly competition amongst each other. Whoever brings the best sacrificial bull, I'm giving that city a golden crown. You can take that golden crown, put it in your city center, take pride in that. So once again, he's just putting himself at the top, saying, hey, I'm going to give you rewards for doing stuff that I dictate. But the rumor starts that he's not just going to preside over Delphi. He's going to take that treasure. There's all that loot we just talked about. Why wouldn't he do that? Doesn't it make sense? Like, this is a guy that has held fake sacrifices before. He stole his mother's servants and made her pay ransom to get them back. This guy has done maneuvers before. This is a scammer, right? He can scam. So, but still, seizing the Temple of Delphi's treasures would be audacious. No one's done that. So it's unthinkable. But people are thinking about it. Like, they're thinking through the unthinkable. So maybe it's not so unthinkable. The Pythian games, in case I wasn't clear, take place right here at the Temple of Delphi. Like, they're right next to each other. So are they like, is he really going to do that? Could he do that? Like, just by himself? You know, like, you need an army to do that. Like, you can't just walk down here with, like, your squad and carry off 1 million pounds of gold and silver. Like, the logistics alone, come on. But he did destroy the defenses at Thermopylae, so maybe he's going to bring an army. Maybe, like, why would he do that unless he wanted to make sure he could get back into Greece? So there's a lot of evidence that he was going to do something, right? Maybe it was the money. Like, that's an obvious target, right? This is a guy who needs money. He's got to pay his mercenaries. And he's done things like this before on a smaller scale. And I just got through telling you just how absurd the amount of wealth there is. So the idea was out there. People are thinking about the unthinkable. And Dionysius had tried for it. So it was even less unthinkable because, you know, we had 2 other kings from outside trying to do it. This is like the West. Remember, we're in Westeros' 100 Kingdoms period, right? Stealing this amount of money, this would be enough to change the fortunes of Westeros, let alone a single city-state. Like, the amount of money, it's just really weird to imagine that this money is just sitting there. But it really was. It makes this era very unique. The level of superstition and belief in the gods is something that's a little hard to fathom for so many people. Like, we've all run into people that have that kind of sincere belief, but to have so many people think that way, I don't know, you don't see that very much. So the threat was apparently enough out there, imagined or not, that the temple priests were like, they went for a reading. They went for hey, temple priestess, what do we do about this? And the answer they received was, Apollo can take care of himself. So that, all right, we won't worry about it too much. However, there was definite confirmation that he was bringing some kind of army. Maybe not a big one. Maybe it was about the same size as that last one, but that made people even more nervous. Something was coming. He destroyed the Thermopylae defenses. He's putting himself in the center. He's talking about being first man in Greece. Other people are talking about him being first man in Greece. He had been throwing lots of parades and military demonstrations, because that's what military dictatorships do. You demonstrate your power. You march in front of people and overawe them with your strength. You say, look what I got here. Look at all these horses. Look at all these men. Look at all their fancy gear. Look how straight their spears are. Look how shiny their swords are. You don't want to fight that. I want to throw it right in your face so you know what you're up against. The nobility of Thessaly are shown this over and over. He throws these demonstrations. The people line up and watch, but it's really for the nobility. It's really for the people that are a threat to him, the people he wants to be cowed. So he does it a lot to, drive the point home and to remind them of how strong he is and to let word spread. So they sit there. These families have to watch him demonstrate. And he hears petitions. He's not a king. He doesn't have the title king. It's Tagus, first military officer, commander-in-chief of Thessaly, right? Even back then, they were very diplomatic about the titles. The word king isn't something you do lightly, especially in Greece, we're a place that hates kings. So one of these demonstrations, or one of these petitions, he's hearing petitions, what the parade is happening, etc. 7 younger nobles start fighting. It was kind of strange. Or why are these guys fighting? Like nobles are bored. It's this parade they have to sit through. It wasn't clear why they were fighting. Before anyone could discern what the deal was, one of them shouted out a word, a signal word, and they all stopped fighting and attacked. Jason's bodyguard were ready. They're always ready, even though, this kind of thing happens a lot in terms of these parades and standing around and all that. Well, the bodyguards were not enough. Jason's prowess was not enough. The assassins got him. They killed 2 of the bodyguards, but Jason was killed. I just got through telling you the whole world changed because of the Battle of Leuctra. Then this happens. The one guy perhaps poised most to take advantage of it all. Now he's gone too. If you thought Thebes and Sparta created a power vacuum, we haven't even gotten to that yet because it's just happened. Now we have another power vacuum on the northern border by someone who amassed more power than either Thebes or Sparta had on their own. But this isn't some state military that just passes to the next leader necessarily. These are mercenaries. Who's going to hire them? Who's going to pay for them? Will it be the next Thessalian leader to take over? Will it be somebody else? This is a big power vacuum. Persia might have been happy about it. They're like, well, maybe we'll hire these guys. Maybe Persia did it. Maybe Persia paid these guys. Maybe they were in on it because this guy's talking about invading Persia, right? The motive is very straightforward there. So they might have even been culprits. They might have even been involved. The thing is, we don't know. It's a little bit unsatisfying, isn't it? We do not know who killed Jason. 5 of the 5 survivors, we are told that they may have done it for fame. Probably not. Probably not. You don't take that risk just for fame. Maybe you will. I mean, tyrant slayers in ancient Greece were genuinely seen as heroes often. But we don't know these guys' names. So I don't think they gained that much fame from it. Like, we literally don't have their names. Not one of them. And but they were apparently treated very well across Thessaly. Like, they wouldn't pay for their own drinks. People liked them. So this goes to show you that maybe Jason's hold on power wasn't as strong as we thought. Maybe as many people weren't as bought in as we may have thought. It was just, he was just so effective at what he did. His rise to power was so well executed. His strategy was so top notch, except for this part. There's always that. The sword of Damocles, right? It's a perfect demonstration of what Dionysius was talking about. He managed to avoid that, at least to this point. He's 62. For all you all know, unless you know the history already, he gets stabbed tomorrow. But Dionysius outlived Jason. And freaking Artaxerxes is still alive too. This guy's in his 70s. Agesilaus as well. But this young man, this up-and-comer, nope, gone. So the fact that these murderers, these assassins were generally / well-received, yet not popularized, is a little odd, right? It seems like if they were celebrated, we'd know them. But apparently they were treated well. So yeah, it kind of does speak to they were agents. They weren't the ones who came up. They were paid. They were offered something. I mean, it wouldn't be the first time a bunch of 20-somethings did something to change politics. But considering what followed up, it's a little suspicious that I think there was something behind them. We just don't know who it is. So if Thessaly thought getting rid of Jason would help the country as a whole, well, if you're thinking they're wrong, then you are thinking correctly. Let's find out together more specifically, however, what's going to happen next. Let's go to their neighbor, however. Their neighbor, Macedonia. Macedonia was growing. They were growing as well. I told you a lot of these kingdoms to the north were growing in part because they were emerging from tribal status to kingdom / monarchy / dynasty / noble houses type stuff. And this country in particular was rising because it was doing a good job of, at last, making use of its natural resources. It had a lot of great natural resources that it just wasn't using, to stuck in its endless cycles of violence, I suppose. Remember, the guy that we've had in charge here for a while was Amyntas III. He in particular was the one making the timber profits that we were speaking of that Jason might try to take over, or at least abscond with one way or another, either through conquest or just trade deals. So Amyntas was making lots of money selling timber to Athens, using that money to upgrade his military, upgrade his defenses, and doing other stuff, right? Now, their leadership wasn't exactly Jason of Pherae level. He wasn't some Paul Atreides type charismatic leader, but he was unusually successful for Macedonia because most Macedonian kings died the way Jason of Pherae did. They were assassinated. King Amyntas, he died as well this same year. I told you this was a storm of swords. He died at age 50, but it wasn't murder as far as we know. He just died. Just regular old died of natural causes, which is... Now, you would have guessed he was murdered because most Macedonian kings get murdered. And based on what happened after his death, it seemed like a murder, but the way people reacted, but we're told. Anyways, Sword of Damocles was just as present over him, and it just picked an odd time to strike. Now, he may have even helped avoid his fate earlier. He may have been invaded by an outside power. Maybe Jason would have come for him. Maybe someone else would have come for him, if not for his timber profiteering, because that wealth made his country stronger and may have forestalled some sort of outside invasion. Now, I told you that he didn't get assassinated, but his wife, Eurydice, did try. That was an episode or two ago. The plot was foiled, and he spared her because they had kids together, and he didn't want to kill his kid's mother. So he just apparently was just kept away from her. He had multiple wives, so, he didn't go celibate or anything. But he died, as we said here, at age 50, and his children, his oldest son, one of the kids with Eurydice, became Alexander II, king of Macedonia. Meanwhile, Eurydice began a liaison with one of the top officials at court, a certain Ptolemy of Alaros, who had been the chief envoy to Athens, the chief ambassador to Athens. He himself was descended from Macedonian royalty. So this is quite a dramatic setup here. We've got an envoy, top power, big player guy, Ptolemy, who's now back. He's not in Athens anymore. He's back in Macedonia doing his thing there. He starts a relationship with the queen dowager, and there's a new young Alexander II as king. Now, he immediately faces a challenge. He's already got challenges around him because Thessaly's his neighbor, and who knows what's going to happen next there. And he's got Persia far to the east. He's got, Athens and Sparta, and Thebes aren't his direct neighbors, but they're certainly involved. And now he's got a challenger. The second he gets the throne, this guy named Pausanias pops up, Pausanias the Pretender, and he's coming from the west. He's trying to get the Macedonian throne. It's chaos in Macedonia. So we got potential chaos in Thessaly, definite chaos in Macedonia, and we still have the very dangerous King Bardillus of Illyria, who's not actually doing anything right this minute that we need to talk about, but he's there, he's dangerous, he's someone to consider. And we have the Thracian king, Cotys I, whose daughter married Iphicrates the Innovator. So many entanglements. Who's next? What's going on? Like, how is everybody else going to react? Who's the big player we haven't talked about yet that's hanging over all of this? The sword of Damocles of nations? Well, that would be Persia, of course. What's going on there? This is a nation that was going through all the things Greece is going through 200 years before, when they were a bunch of city-states forming into an empire. Well, or at least a bigger kingdom. They're like, look at these children. Look at these sweet summer children with their city-states and their democracies. Well, Persia never had democracies. They just saw that as another growing pain towards an eventual kingdom, because that's how they thought. They thought that they're more of an end state. This is where you go. We're the more advanced version. We're more civilized, surely. So while some northern Greek regions were turning into kingdoms, Persia was old hat at this sort of thing. They're busy conquering old places and making them theirs. Old crown, old hat, old crown, old diadem. Yeah. But empires and city-states alike, size doesn't matter when you look at what the biggest internal threats are. Internal struggles happen whether you're a city-state or the biggest empire ever. In fact, arguably, the bigger, the more likely that sort of thing is. Whether it's within the ruling family or a similarly powerful family close to the top. So let's remember the character Tyranny. He had a great career under Artaxerxes. He earned the hand of a princess in marriage, one of Artaxerxes' daughter, but then Artaxerxes said, nope, actually, I want to marry her myself. Then he said, okay, but chill, man. I'm going to give you a different daughter from my wife and I, the main queen, a true-born daughter, both royalty, royal on both sides, not a daughter of one of my concubines. I'll give this daughter to you. Oh, well, that's cool. That makes up for everything. Thank you. Actually, no, I'm taking her. We've been through this. So that's a recap. He offered two different of his daughters to Tyranny, reneged on both counts, and married them himself. His mother encouraged that to push the limits of power. It's like, look, I'm above things. That's one of the things that people in power do to prove how powerful they are. When you're at the top, you go further by proving you can do things no one else can do. I'm the exception. Rich people in the real world do this all the time. How many rich people in the real world think they're above the law? They think they can do things that are completely unacceptable to the rest of us, yet they do it anyway, because they know they can get away with it. They know that the hand of justice will not touch them, or if it does, it will just tap them lightly on the wrist and go, hey, don't do that. At most, right? So Artaxerxes getting away with all this. Remember then as well, he offered his concubine, Aspasia, his favorite. He had her for so long, and he nominated his heir, his oldest son, Darius, to be heir. And Darius, using the Carthene marriage custom that Persia had at the time, which was you get to ask your dad for anything when he names you heir, he asked for Aspasia, if you recall. And Artaxerxes was like, damn, I don't like that at all, but it's the law. But wait, Aspasia, you pick. She picked Darius because he's the next king, so she wants to get in good graces with the next king. But Artaxerxes was still in power, and what did he do, if you recall? He sent her off to be a sexless priestess who couldn't sleep with anyone unless he was around, of course, because, of course, Artaxerxes is above all the rules, even his own rules. So what I told you is that Darius and Tyranny got together and started plotting last time. Here's where we picked that up. It wasn't just a plot. It was kill Artaxerxes. And since Darius was next in line, he could get away with it, right? If he kills his father, he can then forgive himself. He can forgive Tyranny because he's the guy in charge now. So seems like a good plan, right? But these guys aren't very good at what they're doing. These aren't experienced plotters. These aren't people who have a lot of military experience. Tyranny did, but Darius didn't. Once again, as it had in previous Persian intrigues, things hinged on a eunuch. I don't know the name of the eunuch this time. It's like what Ariohota said, though, to Ariane when everything went haywire. She's like, I was so careful. And Ario said, somebody told. Someone always tells. In this case, it was this nameless eunuch who told. Guards came to arrest Tyranny, but Tyranny made like the sergeant who was caught cannibalizing in Stannis' army. Rather than be burned to death, he provoked them to kill him first. He attacked the guards that came for him, and they killed him. That was probably smart, because we saw some of the horrible, horrible methods of death that Persia used on people that were treasonous. And Tyranny was very much afraid of that happening to himself. Probably a smart move. Darius didn't really have to fear that sort of killing because he was royal, but he begged for clemency. And anyway, he begged for an easy death, which he got. He was given an easy death, a simple beheading. In some versions of the story, Artaxerxes did the deed himself. In others, he had to almost threaten the executioner because it's just so unthinkable to kill a prince of the blood. It's just drilled into them that these are not normal people. They're not even really people. They're gods come to live among us. They're chosen by the gods. They're some other species. They're not people. You don't touch them. Everything they want is law. So killing someone like that is a big reversal, even though it's your job as executioner. So it was difficult for him to do that. But yes, even though he wasn't tortured or treated cruelly during his execution, it was ruthless. His whole branch of the family was killed. All of Darius's children, his wives, just about all of them as well. Only a few of the really young ones. There was a kid named Arbupalis who was left alive, and he's going to reappear as a commander about 35 years from now. So yeah, Darius was in his 50s. He had lots of kids. Nearly his whole branch is wiped out, including some of his half-brothers, like people who he didn't father them, but they were killed anyway. Probably some of them were involved in the plot. That's probably why. Some courtiers were as too. So the new heir, you need a new heir, right? So Artaxerxes had to pick a new guy to succeed him. And that was just the next eldest son, a guy named Ariaspes. Now, what do you suppose Ariaspes' odds of outliving Artaxerxes are? Artaxerxes seems to outlive everybody. He's got to go at some point, doesn't he? Well, it wasn't today. Now, one of those daughters that Artaxerxes took back from Tiribazus before he married her and married himself was named Atassa. Now, Atassa was adding to the intrigue and court drama by, yes, she's married to Artaxerxes, and Artaxerxes really liked her, creepy guy that he was. She was also sleeping with the next guy in line. The heir behind Ariaspes, a guy named Aucus. Aucus was second in line behind Ariaspes. So she's sleeping with Aucus, and she had been pushing for Aucus before Darius was killed. She had been pushing for Aucus to be the heir when Darius was still alive. So she just kept that up. She's like, well, it should be Aucus, not Ariaspes. Now, I don't suppose Artaxerxes knew that she was sleeping with Aucus, because if he did, that would have caused problems, because he's jealous, just like he was with Aspasia. Either way, this was not Darius's only problem. Let's not forget the last episode. After 6 years of preparation, Pharnabazus finally attacked Egypt, got into all sorts of arguments with Iphicrates about strategy. Iphicrates was probably right about nearly all of it. And Pharnabazus' attack on Egypt was a big failure. The Great Satraps Revolt. So yeah, Pharnabazus failed in Egypt, Pharnabazus the paymaster, but he was just allowed to retire. He had a distinguished enough career. They just put him out to pasture, said, no embarrassment, just go home, do your thing, retire, live on your estate. It's all good. He was replaced by Demise, who was fearsome, esteemed, very clever leader, who began preparing another invasion. He took over and was like, okay, we're going to get started on this a lot quicker than Pharnabazus did. It's not going to be another 6 years before we attack. He also had a better approach. He was not arrogant about it. He understood that Nectanebo, the rebel pharaoh, was not an easy mark. This was a good leader. The Egyptians were behind him. He had done a lot of building and fortifying, so Egypt was in a stronger position than it had been 5 or 6 years ago. He also didn't have as many Greek mercenaries to work with. Demise did. And he didn't have Iphicrates on his side either. And he probably would have listened to Iphicrates if he did have him. Anyway, he's making his preparations, planning on doing things differently. He's not sure what he's going to do is going to work, but he's had so much success in the past, and he's not going to repeat the mistakes of his predecessor. But he's a powerful, high-ranking noble. He's got his own sources and spies. Persia is that type of place. It's huge. So while he's in Egypt, he's got his own people back at court, keeping him abreast of things, right? They're listening, they're collecting rumors, they're hearing what's being said, what is being said about Demise in the Egyptian campaign. Well, there was a pattern developing, is that they would speak of Demise negatively, even though he's so accomplished. And the reason was, well, you can't say you can't imply that he's better than the great king. Artaxerxes has to be the best at everything. You got the type of leader that has to be recognized as the number one for everything. Sound familiar? Yeah. A leader out there that not only can't handle being criticized, has to be told how great he is all the time. So Demise is being insulted and dishonored semi-regularly, not because of anything he did, but just to not offend the king. This starts to really grate on him. And then, frankly, we're playing the game of telephone here. We got some 1,800, 1,500 miles between Persepolis and Egypt. By the time the insults spoken at court are repeated to Datames in Egypt, it's probably grown a little bit, might be grown a lot. The insults might sound a little bigger. They might sound a lot more flagrant, a lot more insulting. It doesn't really matter. At one point, Artaxerxes orders Datames to take a quick detour and attack this other rebellious, smaller kingdom. And then he maybe a couple weeks later, because remember how slowly these things move and how much time and space is between these two locations, he sends out another message. He's like, actually, don't do that. I'm sorry. I shouldn't have ordered Datames to do that. It's beneath him. He's a higher ranking guy than this. Belay that order. But by the time the belayed order got there, Datames had already done it because he's just that effective. He's like, oh, well, I mean, I can't call it off. It's done. So, and his number two, he has this guy Mithridates with him. Mithridates is one of the more common names in this region for Persian nobles and other related cultural nobles. And don't forget about this Mithridates guy. He's pretty important. So it backfired. Datames did the job that he was above, but that just resulted in the court insulting him even more. They had to talk bad about even more to make up for Artaxerxes kind of looking bad for all this. You can't inflame his very, very thin skin there, right? So Datames finally had enough. He's like, I can't, this is too much. I can't handle this dishonor. I can't be given this important job by the king because it needs an important person. Yet behind my back, they're calling me names, telling me I'm weak and I'm not as good as this. Like, this is too much. He couldn't take it anymore. So he just left. He gathered his closest men, went to Paphlagonia, which is his territory, and started fortifying it. He started spending money on building his army, and he didn't openly rebel. He didn't attack Persia. He just kind of seceded without telling anybody and just waited for the inevitable. Like, eventually they're going to figure this out and they'll come for me. But by then, hopefully I'm well prepared. Now, I called this the Great Satraps Revolt. This is only one satrap, isn't it? Yep, it is only one. There is more to come, but the Great Satraps Revolt, because of the great amount of time, because of the great amount of space, the phrase I keep repeating here, it sounds like we're talking astronomy here. Not all the satraps are going to jump on board right away. In fact, there's going to be years in between some of these. This Satraps Revolt is not going to be short. Now, arguably, Egypt is already a satrapy in revolt. Certainly, Persia sees it that way, but I don't, because it had been like more than 20 years that they've been independent. You know, they've been operating on their own. So you can't really call it a satrapy in rebellion, I think, when they've been independent for so long and there's been a large cessation in any sort of violence. So whatever, that's semantics. Either way, we will shift our focus to another region and come back to this later because it's going to take a while to play out. But one last thing before we move away is Datames was about to go up against Nectanebo, and then he turned. So Nectanebo, all of a sudden, this guy that was about to attack him, he's like, hey, bro, need some help? Enemy of my enemy. So he starts sending money to Datames. And then you can predict what's next. We haven't gotten there yet. But when other satraps start revolting against Persia, oh yeah, Nectanebo's like, hey, need some help? Need some help? I got money. I got chips. What do you need, bro? I got food. We got a lot of food. This is a breadbasket here. You need armies need food. We got that for you. So he is very ready to find allies against Persia and hopefully topple the whole thing. Maybe become into maybe a whole lot of independent nations. Maybe the whole empire can come down. If not, at least a chunk of it. At least push them back, right? Nectanebo says, all right, well, it's not just these nations under the Persian yoke. Let me go talk to Sparta and Athens and figure out what's there. Maybe we can work with them. Notice who was not included just now. Thebes. He began reestablishing ties with Sparta and Athens. Not Thebes. He couldn't reestablish ties with Thebes. He didn't have any, but he didn't establish them either. So it goes to show that, yeah, not everyone looked on the Battle of Leuctra as just everything's different now. They may have looked at it as maybe things are going to change. But inside Greece, it was having a bigger effect than outside. Even though it was having effect outside, it was definitely not as potent. So how about that? Crazy, right? The very old Artaxerxes escapes assassination, so far, at least, while the young Marshal Jason did not. And while Jason had nothing to do with Persian palace intrigue, I have my suspicions that maybe Artaxerxes gave the order or permission to make Jason's death happen. Definitely not a sure thing, but the motive is pretty straightforward, right? Jason talked about attacking Persia, and it was a popular idea in Greece. It wasn't just something that people talked about in hushed whispers. And Persia has spies everywhere. So, it's a lesson in human power. The end of Jason, and possibly the end of Amyntas and some of these other spots, the chaos building, shows, or is about to show, an example. I talked about it. What happens when a man with all these mercenaries just is taken off the playing board? He's gone. He's no longer in the Game of Thrones, but his army is still just sitting there. Who's going to take it over? Who's going to use it? Will it be one person, multiple people? No one has his charisma or force of will, so even if they get the whole thing, they don't necessarily have the buy-in that Jason had. So this is a real dangerous thing, and it's not going to take very long to matter. Let's move on to that immediately. This section is called Fallout Greece. Yeah, it's predictable in some ways that when there's a lot of deaths, or even one death of a powerful monarch or power broker, tyrant, king, whatever title, things happen. There's a big shift. Vacuums fill, then vacuums may cause new vacuums. Leuctra was the center of all this, right? The Battle of Leuctra kicked so much of this off, but there were more meaningful deaths outside of Leuctra than in it. More total deaths than Leuctra. It was a whole battle, right? Just hundreds of nameless soldiers died. Lots of real people died, but we don't know who they were. They weren't the people commanding, other than Cleombrotus, who was commanding badly. So let's go to Thessaly. What happened with the fallout of Jason's death? Polydorus and Polyphron, his two brothers. I don't think they were twins, even though their names are really similar. But they inherited his office and said, hey, let's work together. Let's be co-monarchs. That's not going to work. This is not Sparta. That's probably what Polyphron yelled at Polydorus when he murdered him, because that's what happened. Polyphron and Polydorus started together with some of the mercenaries and headed to Larissa, which was the most powerful city in Thessaly. And they're like, let's shore up our new rule, right, bro? Right, bro. Yeah, let's do that. But Polyphron started the shoring up a little bit early by murdering his brother. I mean, yeah, who ever heard of... Yeah, it's two Taguses. Yeah, this is not Sparta. So he gets to Larissa and immediately starts doing very un-Jason-like things. He's not like, I'm the best, follow me, we all win. No, he's like, I'm in charge, follow me or I kill you. It's a much more expected standard way of doing things, one that we've all seen in a variety of ways, where Jason's way was the new and interesting and different one. This is old hat, and we know what's going to happen. This guy, he's not going to last, right? Right? Yeah, right. So he starts getting people killed. He executes leading citizens. That's always going to go well, right? Some of the citizens seem to have resisted his new edicts. He was like, I want more taxes. I want obedience. I want people to bend the knee, etc. People pushed back gently, had them killed. He had a guy named Polydamas executed. Polydamas was from the leading family. He had been an envoy to Sparta, if I remember correctly. That was just a big thing to do, to kill someone like this. So this is the bar, right? This is a big problem in the real world. You got a guy who's only interested in himself, creates this power structure that only he can manage, and when he's gone, well, he doesn't care. He doesn't care what happens to the rest of the world. When he's dead, he's dead. But that left behind power structure is just... It's a flaming sword held above the world. It's bad. It's just a series of atrocities waiting to happen. It's a series of injustices waiting to happen. Now, this also creates the opportunity for someone to be a hero. You don't have to be a hero, but you can pretend to be a hero. And what I mean by that is, well, this evil Polyphron guy. I had to think for a second which, or Polydorus guy, rather, which of them it was that was still alive. He still very much a Macedonian, and what I mean by that is Macedonians love drinking. Macedonians love drinking contests. And they would drink uncut wine in these drinking contests quite often, which means like no water in the wine. It's just the fermented grape juice only. They don't add anything else to it. It is real strong. So Alexander was the son of Polydorus, and he challenged Polyphron to a drinking bout. He's like, you killed my father. I challenge you to a drinking bout. A pretty standard reaction, right? You killed my father. It's like Princess Bride. I am Alexander. I'm son of Polydorus. You must drink with me. What? Anyway, so this drinking bout happened, and there's one source that says that Alexander poisoned Polyphron at this bout, but I don't think that's what happened. He definitely killed him, though. He killed him with a spear. He stabbed him in the back with a spear. And the reason this is a much more likely version is that Alexander then took the spear and set up a shrine for it. He gave it a name, Tychon, and worshipped it. He made sacrifices to the spear. He was like, hey, y'all, I'm a hero. I killed this evil guy that was trying to seize power that my uncle Jason had built up. He was awful, but I'm the good guy that just put a stop to that. So he won a little bit of acclaim, short-term acclaim for that, I guess. But it didn't take very long for him to be called tyrant. Because, well, the Aleudae, it's an 8-letter word with 6 vowels, y'all. I don't know what to do with it. They were descended from Heracles, who was, of course, the Garth Greenhand of Greece. It's a bajillion different families connect themselves to Heracles. They were worried that this Alexander guy was going to kill them all, because he started killing people kind of like his uncle had. So they hot-footed it west and asked for help from the new king of Macedonia. That's right, Alexander II. They said, hey, Alexander II, we need help against Alexander of Pherae. That's right, Alexander versus Alexander. The bout is set. So Alexander of Pherae has not shored up his power by any means. It's just like Thessaly, as I told you, is a very large place, much larger than Greece, the Greek Peloponnese and the areas of Attica and Boeotia combined. So he gathered what mercenaries and supporters he could and sort of buckled down, like sort of hunkered down a bit. But the Aleudae had left some supporters behind in the city, and those supporters opened like a side gate to let Alexander of Macedon in, along with the refugees who fled. And they took the city and then put the citadel under siege. The Aleudae had 2 branches. The other is called the Scopadae of Cranon. So there's the Aleudae and the Scopadae. It's like a cadet branch. So Alexander of Macedon then brought his army to Cranon to shore that up. So the Aleudae had the king of Macedon now holding their capital and their sub-capital, their other important city. This is kind of similar. If you remember way back earlier in the series, Alexander II's father, Amyntas III, the one who just died, he had loaned some of his territory away, and then they wouldn't give it back. This is very similar here. You invited Alexander II of Macedon in to hold these things, and they're like, will you give it back now that we've settled things up? He's like, no, I don't think so. Instead, I'm going to bring more troops over and fortify them even more. Keep my hold on them even firmer. Somehow Alexander of Pherae, I don't know how, it's not recorded. He got out. He escaped the siege or something and ran back to Pherae with what followers he still had, all the while shouting, you haven't seen the last of me, like some cartoon villain. And indeed, we have not seen the last of him. This guy is a real piece of work. I told you when this series began that there would be a Ramsay Bolton. Well, here he is. Alexander of Pherae is Ramsay Bolton. Yep, he sure is. And by the way, I never did it, but I think Jason of Pherae was Mance Rayder. Yeah, I think that's who he was. Charismatic, but also strong leader, united a bunch of people. Stuff started to fall apart, and when he was killed, yeah. Anyway, moving on. So Sparta had to deal with a number of their allies and subjects using this opportunity to break free. So like I said, Thebes' first goal was to shore up their territory, get rid of the Spartan influence. Sparta's first task after losing at Leuctra was to make sure they didn't lose more allies. Like this is the time where allies are going to jump ship. We got to stop that from happening. We got to shore up our power too. So both sides are shoring up their power before the inevitable next conflict, which is coming. But Persia's no longer excited about helping Sparta. Big blow to Sparta's hopes, because Persia was always kind of like, you guys are our enforcement arm. We'll give you a little strength. You're our bulldog in Greece. We'll give you some money here and there, and you guys enforce things and kind of make sure our will is at least somewhat enforced there. You know, you hold peace conferences in our name, do things like that. So that made Sparta kind of nervous. They were already nervous. Now they're more nervous. They're like, wait, are they, number one, does Persia just think we're weak because we are weak? Are we actually weak? Or what? Or are they going to give it to somebody else? Are they going to give their backing to somebody else? They're really afraid of that. They were really afraid that Athens or even Thebes would get the backing of Persia because, well, they would probably give it to somebody if not them. That's not actually what happened in the short term. In the short term, Persia just stayed out of it for a little while. Like, we got our own problems. We got palace intrigue. We got Egypt. So they were a little distracted, but Greece didn't know that. And Sparta wanted to strike back quickly to, you know, maybe diminish the effect of their loss, which meant Agesilaus had to go back to the field. Yes, he had his son Archidamus. Archidamus was capable, but Agesilaus's wounded leg, the one that he had like a strange cyst that burst and he almost bled to death, that almost killed him, that was healed. And remember, his other leg was already shorter than the right. Like he had, so both his legs were damaged in a way, one from birth and one from battle or just disease. But he was ready. He in his 70s, but he was finally ready to go back out again. It's like, just when I thought I was out, they pull me back in. But he couldn't go right for Thebes. He hates Thebes. He hasn't stopped hating Thebes for decades, but he had to do this allies thing. He had to work with them first. So he had to take, either bring your allies back into the fold, or the threat of Thebes becomes much more dangerous. But to add insult to injury, Agesilaus II, this new 10-year-old king, he just up and died. Now, there's no foul play that we know of here, and why would there be? There's no point in killing the 10-year-old king unless it puts an adult in charge. It didn't. It put a younger brother in charge. Now we have like an 8-year-old brother. Another the second. We go from Agesilaus II, Agesilaus II, Cleomenes II. So there you go. That's pretty wild, right? So again, yeah, no reason to suspect foul play. Why would you kill the 10-year-old king who's not doing anything anyway, right? So, but it just from a religious perspective, though, it's just another thing that the Spartans are nervous about or anxious about. Like, God, are the gods on our side? Our 10-year-old king just dropped dead, man. That is not a good sign. That's not a good omen, right? And they knew as well the threat wasn't just to their lives, but to their power structure, their way of life, their culture. They knew that Epaminondas had his sights set on Messene. Messene is Sparta's biggest abuse. Sparta's enslaved neighbor. They are Greek just like everybody else in this area. And Greeks, yeah, they're hypocritical. They're willing to enslave non-Greeks. A lot of them are. But not so much other Greeks. That's seems to be a distinction. So Sparta has had Messene enslaved for hundreds of years. So long that some people kind of go along with it. Like, yeah, they don't even really think of them that way. They're not perceiving it that way. But Epaminondas like restarted that conversation saying, hey, remember, this is why the Battle of Leuctra happened. Remember, they were not allowed to sign for all of Boeotia. Like, yeah, we signed the peace treaty on behalf of all of our region. Sparta wouldn't let them. Agesilaus wouldn't let them. And he's like, well, but you're signing for all of Sparta, which includes Messene. How can you sign for Messene if we can't sign for the rest of Boeotia? It's very hypocritical, huh? Agesilaus got so mad, then the war happened, right? And here we are. Agesilaus knows that's what Epaminondas had his sights set on because he brought it up at the conference. That hasn't stopped. He knows that's their next target. He knows they're going to come and try to free Messene. And that's a whole nother group of soldiers, potentially, that will fight for Thebes and or at least for themselves against Sparta. This Spartan system isn't just collapsing from the inside, it's collapsing from the outside. But let me tell you, folks, Agesilaus is not going to go down easy. And there's a lot of other nameless Spartans who are willing to give their lives on the battlefield or elsewhere to stop this result, even if it might seem somewhat inevitable. Is it inevitable? Well, we'll just have to see. So Epaminondas, he's not like, I'm not trying to wipe out Sparta. I'm not trying to kill Sparta. I'm just trying to get rid of their slave army. I'm trying to get rid of the source of so much of their power, which is a very unjust source of power. You've got Greek slaves doing your farming so that you can spend all your time fighting. That's why you're so good at fighting, because you don't have to farm, right? That's not fair. It's not only unfair in terms of your military supremacy is unearned because you're using slavery, but it's also you're using your military supremacy as leverage to show that you're the best. Yet you didn't earn it the proper way. You earned it through slavery of your fellow Greeks. They see all this argument coming. They don't agree with it. They've obviously been engaged in this for hundreds of years, but they can see the weakness, the moral weakness in their structure that people like Epaminondas will hammer away at. In addition to him hammering away in more traditional military means with, armies and stuff. We haven't had a second battle yet, but it's coming. And a third, and more battles are coming, y'all. There's just this is that moment where the two boxers have retreated to their corner to get the blood wiped off, the sweat wiped off, to discuss strategy, but they're going right back for it very soon. So now they could negotiate with greater leverage. Thebes could. That's the other thing. Sparta is now negotiating with lesser leverage. Before, when they're talking to their allies, they could be a bully. They're like, well, if you don't join with us, you know what's going to happen. They don't even have to say it. If you don't join with us willingly, then plato o plomo, right? The old Spanish drug cartel line, silver or lead. You either take our money or you take our bullets. Same thing. That's what Sparta would do. You either take our alliance or you take our spears. And now Thebes could renegotiate. Thebes could say, hey, so Athens said no to us, but we get to go back to every single ally we had and some that we didn't and say, hey, before you rejected us, or hey, before we agreed to this deal, but let's tear that deal up and have a new deal because we're the bosses now. That is not how Epaminondas wants to do it. But he's only one man. He's only one Theban leader in a proto-democracy. He's not a king. He doesn't have the power of an Agesilaus. He may have the clout of an Agesilaus. His word carries a lot of weight because he's proved himself both in his behavior and in his decisions. But this is the cusp of a new Thebes. Everything is different, and they have to deal with all the problems that humanity always faces when people gain a lot of power, especially when people gain a lot of power all of a sudden. Is it going to ruin them? Are they going to be corrupted by their own power, or thanks to their rather unusually moral leadership, will they actually do some things differently? Are they going to be bullies? Are they going to be true leaders? Or are they going to be a little of both? We'll see. We said kings and tyrants would alter their plans in the wake of Thebes' victory at Leuctra, but the ground kept shifting. Who can make plans when more kings and more leaders keep dying right afterwards? So the smoke hasn't cleared. We had a whole battle, and I was trying to get to the smoke clearing after the battle, but the smoke just got thicker, my friends. But it's a very interesting, fun type of smoke. If we recap a little bit, Macedon saw the death of their king Amyntas III. His son Alexander II takes over. Sparta lost a king in 371 before this episode, and then their 10-year-old king dies in this episode of natural causes less than a year later. Jason is assassinated. Then his brother kills his other brother. Then his nephew kills that brother. Prince Darius and Tiribazus failed in their coup and lost their lives. Darius' whole branch of the family lost his lives. But Tiribazus' family, I didn't mention that anything else didn't happen to them. They will continue to do interesting things. Darius some Persians may wish that Tiribazus' whole family was wiped out too. So that's a lot. That's a lot of power vacuums, and those power vacuums are still happening. Some of them are big power vacuums like the one left behind by Jason. Some of them are kind of uncertain like Prince Darius. And some of them are very much ongoing like Amyntas III. And as for those deaths of kings in Sparta, well, we'll see what kind of difference that makes. We'll see if that's just a blip for them or something that proves to be a much bigger problem than they thought. Because, well, Agesilaus and Artaxerxes are still somehow alive, but they're old. It could go any minute. We're not just waiting on an assassin. We could be. We could just be waiting on Father Time, Mother Nature, right? Their stuff is happening. And Artaxerxes is facing a revolt. Just because Darius's assassination plot didn't work doesn't mean there won't be another one, right? Similar issue, different scale. Both Sparta and Artaxerxes, the authoritarian leaders of this era, have lost substantial ground and are having to deal with those that were former subjects. Agesilaus still hates Thebes, no friend of Epaminondas, though there is some respect there. If you're expecting a showdown between those two, good, it's coming. Pelopidas is the one that's really going to react the most strongly to this Alexander Pherae guy. And, well, we'll see what happens there. It's going to be interesting. I'm excited to tell you about Ramsay Bolton versus Brandon Stark, because, yes, as I've said before, that's my pick for Pelopidas's parallel. So we'll see Ramsay begin Ramsaying, and we'll see what Brandon Stark does about it. Like A Song of Ice and Fire, we have so many nations and players and interesting figures that we can go hours without some of them being heard from. We barely heard from Athens today, for example. They mostly sat on the sidelines, but that can only last for so long, right? Right. Exactly. By the next episode, they'll be right back in the swing of things. We didn't even mention Cabrius or Phocion or Timotheus. I did mention Plato, but he's not exactly a military leader. Important guy, Athenian. They will return to take part in what can only be described as barely controlled chaos. Very interesting and fun barely controlled chaos. Barely controlled chaos. BCC. It's almost BC. I told you this episode would resemble a Storm of Swords. I hope you agree. I hope it lived up to that. Well, after a Storm of Swords is a Feast for Crows. Indeed. That is what I think this next episode will feel a lot like. Power vacuums taking a lot more lives. Crows feasting on the dead. And dying kingdoms being pickings for someone stronger. Our trivia question was, what was used to barely hold the sword of Damocles aloft? A single horsehair. Did anyone get that?
Dom said a hair. He didn't say the horsehair.
Close enough. So, that's definitely close enough. Yeah.
Got it.
Good job, Dom. Shout out to Folkwise Twitch channel. They're most Tuesdays episodes. Are they on hiatus right now?
Yeah, they're working on a conference that they're doing, a Folkwise event. So I think they're throwing all their energies, especially into that occasional stream still.
Cool. Well, check out Folkwise. Look at their Twitch page. They'll have it. I'm sure there's a we'll be back on type notification there. And if not, you'll just subscribe or something and you'll get the notification when they come back on. Thank you all very much for hanging out today. I had a lot of fun with this, as I always do. I spend, honestly, more time with this than a lot of some of these Song of Ice and Fire topics because I have more to learn. I have more to learn about this. You know, there's just things that I just don't know. Whereas, of course, I've been studying A Song of Ice and Fire for 12 years as a podcaster and 10 years before that as a fan. So, anyway. Someone here, apparently Ashea put a note here for me that says the channel called Fig Tree. There's a channel called Fig Tree that is being recommended to me. Well, I'll say that out loud because if it's a good recommendation for me, it might be for you all as well. Either way, I will report back on that because I'm always interested in new content along these lines. We'll be back with more Thebes and Sparta and Athens and Persia and some of the other nations we haven't heard from in a while. Some big entanglements, some tough philosophical and moral situations, and of course, a lot more blood. A lot of cities are going to take their opportunity to throw off what they perceive as the Spartan yoke, and it will not be peaceful. Until next time, my friends, we'll certainly be returning with more A Song of Ice and Fire content before the next episode of this, but there will be lots more coming. Until then, you know what to do, my friends. Valar Rereadus.